A millionaire CEO secretly watched his humble employee helping homeless people in the cold night, and in that moment, he fell hopelessly in love with her heart. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The lights on the 26th floor of Wilson Enterprises were rarely on after midnight, but for Daniel Wilson, late nights were routine. As CEO of one of the city's fastest-growing conglomerates, he often found himself reviewing quarterly reports or signing last-minute documents in his sleek, glass-walled office. The reflected skyline glimmered behind him, painting Daniel's figure as a solitary silhouette against an endless expanse of lights. If someone had told him a month ago that a chance discovery in the after-hours corridors of his own building would change not just his life, but also the lives of many less fortunate souls, he would have merely raised an eyebrow. Yet fate, with all its twists, had chosen to reveal a different path. That night, Daniel was hunched over a complicated set of spreadsheets, trying to figure out how best to consolidate two recent acquisitions. The hum of the central air system was the only sound keeping him company. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, exhaustion pressing on his temples. Even in a custom-tailored suit, the corners of his eyes spoke of fatigue. In the hush of the office, he suddenly became aware of a faint noise. Metal pans clinking, water running, hushed steps echoing down the deserted hallway. It was nothing more than an echo, but it was unusual. The executive floors were generally deserted once staff clocked out. Curiosity piqued, he rose from his desk and smoothed back his neatly styled hair. Daniel's reflection in the glass wall offered a glimpse of a proud, confident man. Yet beneath that professional veneer, there flickered a trace of loneliness he never shared with anyone. He headed out into the corridor, the plush carpet muffling his footsteps as he followed the faint kitchen sounds. He never expected to discover anyone in the company's industrial kitchen at such an hour. The sight that awaited him when he carefully pushed open the door surprised him, to say the least. Standing at one of the prep counters was a slim figure in a gray cleaning uniform, hair pulled back in a simple braid. A large metal pot simmered on the stove. The sharp aroma of onions and spices filled the air. It smelled savory, comforting. This was far from any typical office meal. Daniel recognized her vaguely. Rachel, the night shift cleaner. She had been recently hired through a janitorial agency contracted by Wilson Enterprises. He'd never spoken more than a polite greeting to her, usually just a murmured hello on his way out when she came in with the vacuum. Now here she was, stirring soup in the stainless steel cooking pot, surrounded by half-packed plastic containers. Daniel felt his breath catch. Instead of rifling through the supply closets or misusing the premises, Rachel was cooking. Confusion mixed with curiosity. A part of him considered stepping forward and asking outright what she was doing. This was his building, after all. But something in her posture, patient, almost tender, held him back. He watched her taste the soup, check the seasoning, then carefully ladle it into containers. She was so focused, so gentle in her movement, that Daniel couldn't help but notice. This was not the hustle of someone stealing corporate resources or trying to sneak away the best produce. It was more like a mother trying to prepare a comforting meal. Suddenly, Rachel placed the ladle aside and covered each container with tight lids. She arranged them in a large, insulated bag. Then, from an old cardboard box she'd set on a side counter, she retrieved what looked like folded blankets, neatly stacked. The entire scene bewildered Daniel. At that point, he stepped fully into the room, letting the door swing behind him with a soft click. Rachel's startled gasp broke the hush. She nearly dropped a container upon seeing Daniel Wilson, the CEO himself, standing there in his immaculate suit. For a second, she looked like she might run. Then, timidly, she lowered her eyes and spoke, her voice trembling. "Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry. I didn't think anyone was still here." Daniel swallowed. momentarily unsure how to respond. Part of him wanted to bark out the typical question, "What do you think you're doing?" But something about her wide, earnest eyes disarmed him. He noticed the circles under them, the honest fear and embarrassment in her expression. She was clearly expecting to be reprimanded or even fired on the spot. He cleared his throat. "I'm working late," he began in a voice that tried for neutrality. "And you?" Rachel exhaled a shaky breath. She seemed surprised he hadn't demanded an explanation more harshly. Tucking a stray hair behind her ear, she said quietly, "I volunteer at a homeless shelter downtown. Well, not exactly a shelter, more like a makeshift camp. Some nights we run out of meals, especially in the colder months. I know it's not protocol to use the company's kitchen, but the stoves here are bigger and the leftover supplies in the pantry, they help me make extra portions." She bit her lip, eyes drifting to the containers. "I know it's not right, but these people, they have nowhere else to go, and they get hungry. I just wanted to do something." For a moment, the entire building seemed to go silent. The old fluorescent lights buzzed above them. Daniel found himself looking at her with an intensity he hadn't felt in a long time, since perhaps the beginning of his career, when altruism and ambition coexisted in a more innocent form. He expected to feel anger at the unauthorized use of supplies or annoyance at the potential liability, but instead he felt moved. He stepped closer, noticing that there wasn't any sign of personal benefit for Rachel. She wasn't stashing away goodies for herself. She was methodically preparing, labeling, organizing. Everything was for others. How many nights had she been doing this? Where did she find the time or the energy? She was a night shift cleaner, likely on meager wages, and still, she found a way to feed people she barely knew. "You shouldn't be here alone so late," Daniel said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "It's not safe. What if something happened to you?" Rachel blinked, clearly not expecting this line of concern. I try to be careful. I can't leave the shift earlier without losing hours, so I come down here during my break and work fast. If security found out, I might lose my job." Daniel's mind swirled with thoughts. Yes, the security cameras were probably recording. Yes, some brand new cleaning lady was in the executive kitchen after hours, using company resources. Yes, all of that spelled trouble in a strictly corporate sense. But another voice deep inside him, an old spark of compassion he rarely showed in boardrooms, said otherwise. He scratched the back of his neck, trying to decide how to respond. "Look, I'm not going to fire you," he said quietly, scanning her reaction. "But I need to understand everything. How often do you do this?" Rachel's shoulders relaxed an inch, relief crossing her face. "Not every night," she confessed. "Only when the shelter supply is too low. Maybe once or twice a week. I buy some ingredients myself, but I can't afford too much, and the big pots here help me make enough to fill containers. When morning comes, I finish my shift, sign out, and drive the meals over to the camp. Most of them are older folks or single parents. It's not a proper shelter. There's no staff, no official funding, just volunteers like me. We do our best." She spoke with earnest conviction that gently tugged at Daniel's heart. His father had once been a philanthropic businessman, always pushing Daniel to see the bigger picture. But in Daniel's quest to grow the company, he drifted from those lessons. Now, in the hush of the industrial kitchen, hearing Rachel's words about real people in dire need, he felt something old and empathetic stirring inside him. He let out a long breath, placed his hands in his pockets. "I appreciate your honesty," he said. "I understand why you're doing it, but you must realize there are policies, liability issues if something goes wrong with the food or if you get hurt. This is complicated." Her face fell as she nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. "I know it's not exactly above board, but these people, Mr. Wilson, some of them are veterans, some have disabilities, many have children. They go entire days without a full meal. I can't just—" Her voice trailed off, and for a moment the only sound was the bubbling soup on the stove. Daniel watched her carefully, noticing how her small hands trembled around the ladle she still clutched. She was bracing for the worst. Perhaps at that moment, if he'd chosen to do what corporate policies dictated, that would have been the end of it. A formal complaint, a swift termination, a hush-hush approach to keep the story from damaging the Wilson Enterprises brand. But a decisive shift had already begun in his chest. Maybe it was the memory of his father's philanthropic dreams, or maybe it was simply Rachel's unwavering commitment to helping others. He offered a tight-lipped, reassuring smile. "I won't report you," he repeated softly. "In fact, maybe I can help." Rachel's eyes widened. She glanced up from the floor as if she couldn't quite believe what she'd heard. "Help?" she echoed. Before Daniel could answer, the last alarm on the soup pot beeped. Rachel quickly turned off the burner, the rhythmic hiss of steam subsiding. The smell of warm spices enveloped them both like an unspoken promise. In that instant, Daniel decided that no matter how unorthodox or unapproved, he was going to do more than just look the other way. He was the CEO, after all. And if feeding a few hungry souls meant bending some rules, maybe that was the kind of boss he needed to be. "Let me see those containers," he said, stepping around the counter. "I might know a better way to load them up. We have a giant walk-in fridge that might keep things fresh. Plus, I can arrange for a driver tomorrow." You don't have to do that." Rachel breathed, overwhelmed. "No," Daniel said firmly, "I don't. But maybe it's time Wilson Enterprises does something more meaningful than just writing an annual charity check. This stays between us for now. We'll figure out the details." He reached for a container, feeling the warmth through his fingertips. A silent hush passed between them, his earlier exhaustion replaced by a quiet conviction. For a moment, Rachel looked as if she might cry from relief. Then she just nodded, offering him a shy, grateful smile. Neither of them could have guessed the chain of events their tentative alliance would set in motion, or how deeply their fates would intertwine from that moment onward. Outside, the city lights still glowed. Inside, Daniel Wilson, a man more accustomed to boardrooms than battered tin pots, felt something new lighting up his heart. Maybe it was a sense of purpose beyond mere profit. Maybe it was the gentle presence of a woman who, for all her challenges, had chosen kindness over comfort. One thing was certain. The hush of that industrial kitchen was about to give way to a story that neither Daniel nor Rachel could ever have predicted. Nighttime brought a different kind of life to the soaring headquarters of Wilson Enterprises. Dimmed corridors took on a subdued glow. The distant hum of the cleaning staff's vacuums a gentle reminder that, somewhere in these quiet halls, people still worked while the rest of the world slept. In the days following their first late-night encounter, Daniel Wilson found himself restless long after normal office hours. Even though he had plenty of reasons to head home, he could finish reading performance reviews or sign documents remotely, some curious pull made him linger each evening. Perhaps it was the desire to confirm that his somewhat impulsive don't-tell-anyone arrangement with Rachel was going smoothly. Or, more honestly, it might have been that he wanted to see her again. The hush of the executive floor corridor felt oddly comforting as Daniel paced toward the same industrial kitchen. He hadn't mentioned a word to his staff. He'd told no one of the night he found Rachel portioning out homemade stew. Even so, each time he passed a security camera, a tiny flicker of anxiety nudged him. What if this is discovered? But that worry was quickly overshadowed by a sensation he could only describe as protectiveness. After all, if word got out about Rachel's midnight volunteering, it could cost her a job she desperately needed, and if she lost that job because of him— Daniel clenched his fists, determined not to let that happen. He was halfway to the kitchen, the carpet swallowing each footstep, when he slowed. A flicker of light passed beneath the door. Rachel must already be there. Through the narrow glass panel, he could see the top of her head bobbing near the far counter. Quietly, he slipped inside. At once, he noticed how efficiently she worked. She had a stack of fresh vegetables on one side, a donation from some produce market maybe, while rice simmered on a back burner, and a mountain of plastic tubs sat ready to be filled. Every movement she made carried a sense of urgency. Each spoonful of sauce carefully measured, each container sealed meticulously. She wore gloves for cleanliness and kept the counters spotless. Anyone might have thought she was a professional caterer rather than a part-time cleaning lady with a giant heart. Daniel cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle her too much. "Need a hand?" Rachel whirled around, nearly dropping the large spoon she was using. "Mr. Wilson!" Her voice came out in a hushed squeak. Then, remembering her place, she tried to recover, eyes darting to the door. I didn't hear you come in." He offered a sheepish smile. "Daniel. Just Daniel after hours, if you don't mind." He nodded at the pots on the stove. "What's on the menu tonight?" Rachel hesitated, uncertain whether small talk was appropriate. But as she studied the CEO's expression, friendly, if a little shy, she relaxed. "Roasted vegetable stew and some rice. It's nothing fancy, but it'll fill people up and it travels well." Daniel stepped closer, inhaling the savory aroma. "It smells delicious." He then pointed toward a box of spare produce. "Mind if I wash these? I saw an empty sink, and I figure you could use some extra hands." The suggestion triggered a moment of stunned silence. For a fleeting second, Rachel seemed torn between gratitude and confusion. He was the boss, after all. But she nodded, handing him a spare apron. "Sure, as long as you don't mind. It's a bit messy." Her words were matter-of-fact, but Daniel could detect the faint smile tugging at her lips. He took the apron, slightly crumpled from years of use, and tied it around his waist. It felt odd standing there in an expensive suit jacket, rolling up shirt sleeves to wash onions, but in a strangely refreshing way. Usually he was orchestrating corporate deals or negotiating with board members. Now the weight in his hands was not a pen or a contract, but turnips and green peppers that needed rinsing. He turned on the faucet, letting the cool water run over the vegetables. "How do you manage to afford all this?" he asked quietly, glancing at the crates. "I mean, every donation helps, but produce isn't cheap." Rachel moved to stir the stew. "A local grocer I know sets aside unsold but still fresh items. I pick them up on my way here. Helps them reduce waste, helps me feed more people. Win-win?" Daniel paused. "That's really resourceful, but the cost of packaging and time, that still must come from your pocket. You're already on a modest salary. How do you manage?" The question was gentle, laced with genuine concern. Rachel shrugged one shoulder. "I do what I can. I'm not the only one, of course. A couple of other volunteers help. Some people donate old blankets. Others come once a week with bread from local bakeries." She sighed. "You'd be surprised how many decent folks are out there willing to help. They just need someone to coordinate." A kind of hush settled between them. Daniel felt a twinge of, what was it, admiration? Or perhaps guilt that he hadn't noticed any of this need before, that while he was busy expanding his empire, countless men and women in the city were going hungry or sleeping on the streets. After a quiet moment, he spoke again. "You said the location is not an official shelter, right? Something more like a hidden camp?" Rachel nodded. "It's unofficial, just tents pitched in a vacant lot. The city tries to clear them sometimes, but winter's coming. People have nowhere else to go." A shadow passed her expression. "The rent in this city is skyrocketing. Some of these folks had jobs last year, apartments, families. One medical bill or job loss, and they end up in that camp. I can't fix everything, but I can feed them once or twice a week." Daniel turned off the faucet, setting the rinsed vegetables in a colander. He realized that of all the high-profile philanthropic endeavors he'd read about or occasionally donated to, nothing felt as urgent and real as this. "I'd like to see it," he said simply. "Maybe I can help more than just letting you use the kitchen, or You said you drive supplies there. Maybe I can come along?" Rachel looked up sharply, her eyes widening. You want to come with me?" She paused, probably remembering that being seen with a homeless encampment might lead to unflattering headlines for the CEO of Wilson Enterprises. "I'm not sure it's a good idea. It can be rough. Not exactly the best place for a guy like me," Daniel finished gently. There was no accusation in his tone, just acknowledgement of the gap between them. "I get it. But if I'm going to help, I want to understand what's really happening out there." He dried his hands on a clean towel, that sense of conviction stirring anew in his chest. "It might be risky," she warned, hesitating. "Sometimes it's not safe. We only go in pairs or groups, but if you really want to, come tomorrow morning. I'll finish my shift, load the car, and drive the meals over. I can't guarantee you'll like what you see." Daniel simply nodded, stepping aside as she returned to portioning out the stew. "I appreciate the concern, but if there's anything I've learned in business, it's that real solutions start by witnessing the problem up close." They let the conversation end there, working side by side, a mild tension in the air giving way to a gentle camaraderie. Spoonful by spoonful, container after container, they filled enough to feed perhaps 40 people, maybe more. Daniel found himself glancing at Rachel from time to time, intrigued by the calm determination etched on her face. Even her exhausted posture couldn't hide the glow of purpose that lit her eyes. Half an hour later, they were done. Rachel carefully labeled each container. Daniel volunteered to help carry them out to her small, battered sedan. Loading the trunk in the quiet, near-empty parking garage, he felt a twinge of sadness. He pictured these same containers hours later being handed out to men and women who had no place to call home. Rachel shut the trunk and exhaled. "Well, that's it. Normally I leave them in my car so I can drive straight over in the morning. Will you be here tomorrow then, if you still want to come?" Daniel mustered a small, encouraging smile. "Count on it. Let me know if you need me to bring anything else. I can arrange some blankets or new thermoses." He paused. "Unless that would rouse suspicion around the building. I can do it quietly." A flicker of gratitude crossed her face. "That would be great, thank you. I'm off in a few hours, so maybe around 8, we can head out together." He nodded. They stood there for a moment, uncertain how to end this newly formed agreement. Rachel at last offered a hushed, "Good night, Mr. Wilson, Daniel." "Good night," he replied softly. As she pulled away in her sedan, Daniel lingered in the parking garage. The air smelled of concrete and faint oil residue. His reflection in the tinted glass of his own black SUV stared back at him. Rumpled suit, sleeves still rolled up, apron smudges on his forearms. It was an odd look for the formidable CEO so many knew him to be, but for once he wasn't worried about how he appeared. Instead, he felt a sense of anticipation, as if stepping toward a threshold in his life he hadn't realized was there. When Daniel finally got into his car, he let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. A wave of thoughts crashed in. What if this goes sideways? What if the board finds out? What if the press catches him delivering meals to the homeless? Would that be a scandal or a positive headline? He shrugged off those worries, starting the engine. They were overshadowed by one far more pressing question. Why did he feel such a personal need to see these people fed, to protect Rachel's efforts? Why did her kindness evoke a stir of empathy he'd all but buried under corporate agendas? He left the question unanswered as he drove home through neon-lit streets, the city's towering skyline giving way to quieter neighborhoods. No matter how plush the seat under him, no matter how advanced the GPS on his dashboard, Daniel couldn't help but think about the men and women who might be sleeping on sidewalks or under tarps tonight. In a matter of hours, he'd be meeting some of them face to face. Maybe it was time, he thought, to let that old philanthropic spark reignite. A piece of the father he'd lost, a piece of himself he'd buried. And maybe, just maybe, Rachel was the catalyst he needed. Morning light broke over the city in washes of pale gold and pink. Daniel Wilson stood by the lobby windows of Wilson Enterprises, watching the sunrise reflect on the glass towers around him. Usually, he would have been in his office by now, reviewing numbers with the CFO or prepping for a meeting with investors. Today, however, he had more pressing business. He was waiting for Rachel so they could deliver food to the homeless camp. He glanced at his watch. 7:55. The cleaning staff's shift typically ended at 8, meaning Rachel would be heading downstairs soon, hopefully with last night's containers still safe in her trunk. Despite the casual arrangement, Daniel felt a flutter in his gut, a mix of nerves and anticipation he couldn't fully explain. He had grown used to always being in control, seldom stepping into unfamiliar territory, and an impromptu visit to a homeless camp was definitely beyond his comfort zone. At precisely 7:58, the elevator doors parted with a gentle chime. Out stepped Rachel, looking tired but resolute, her cleaning uniform hidden under a loose jacket. She caught sight of Daniel waiting by the tall windows and hesitated only a moment before walking over. Through the glass, the city buzzed with a typical weekday rush, commuters hurrying to desk jobs, bustling sidewalks. She gave Daniel a quick, apologetic smile. "Morning," she said, her voice hushed from a long night's work. "I brought the car around to the loading area. Hope that's okay?" Daniel nodded. "Perfect. I have a few blankets and thermoses in my SUV. I'll swing by and transfer them to your trunk. Then I'll ride with you, if that's all right?" Rachel blinked as if taken aback. "I thought you might follow behind. You're sure you want to leave your car here?" He shrugged mildly. "I can pick it up later. I'd rather see everything up close, and that means going together, not trailing you from a distance." A flicker of relief and, was that admiration, flashed in her expression, though she quickly masked it. "Okay, let's do that." They made their way through the side exit to the employee parking section. Surrounded by sedans and a handful of luxury cars, Rachel's old, battered hatchback looked out of place, like it had wandered into a car show for brand-new models. Daniel didn't bat an eye. He discreetly retrieved 2 large shopping bags of supplies from his own sleek SUV and transferred them to her trunk. Rachel opened it for him, revealing a neat row of plastic containers stacked in 2 coolers to keep the food as fresh as possible. Even at a glance, Daniel guessed there was enough to feed at least 30 or 40 people. Rachel turned the key in the ignition, and the engine rattled to life. Daniel settled in the passenger seat, a sensation of stepping into unknown territory creeping up his spine. As they pulled out, the security guard at the exit gate gave them both an odd look, clearly unused to seeing the CEO riding shotgun in a janitorial worker's car. Daniel raised a polite hand in greeting, ignoring the guard's startled expression. Once they were on the open road, he exhaled, feeling the tension of the company building fade behind him. "Where is this place?" he asked, keeping his tone gentle. Rachel guided the car onto a busy avenue, then headed toward the city's industrial outskirts. "It's an abandoned lot near the old highway bypass," she explained, tapping the steering wheel anxiously. "Used to be a construction site for condos, but the project stalled. Now it's a patchwork of tents, tarps, and plywood structures. The city tries to clear it out every few months, but people always return. There's nowhere else with enough space for them to sleep without immediate eviction." Daniel studied her profile, noticing the fatigue etched in her features. She looked as though she'd spent more nights worrying about others than sleeping soundly herself. "Thank you for letting me tag along," he said quietly. "I know this might complicate things for you." Her lips twitched in a wry smile. "It's not exactly a company-approved activity, but you're the CEO, so I guess you can approve anything you want, right?" She glanced sideways with hesitant humor in her eyes. "Seriously, though, be prepared. This might not be the friendliest place at first glance. Folks here have been through a lot." The next 20 minutes slid by in tense silence. The city blocks turned grimmer, the buildings older, graffiti marking shuttered storefronts. The roads had more potholes, The sidewalks more litter. Daniel's chest tightened at the stark difference from the polished downtown sector where his offices gleamed. Did he know, truly, how many of these areas existed in his own city? A wave of guilt washed over him. Some part of him felt responsible, as if his success had overshadowed so many people struggling just blocks away. Eventually, Rachel turned into a side street, passing a rusted chain-link fence. Beyond it lay a barren patch of dirt and gravel, dotted with makeshift tents. Tattered tarps, abandoned vehicles, and wood pallets formed what seemed like a small shanty town. Fires smoldered in old oil drums. The wind carried the scent of smoke, damp earth, and something heavier: desperation. She parked near the chain-link fence, cut the engine. "We usually set up a table near the middle. People line up for food. Don't worry, most of them know me. But keep your wallet hidden and phone in your pocket, okay? Some folks have a hard time trusting strangers in suits." Daniel nodded, hastily removing his tie and tucking it in a jacket pocket. Then he rolled up his sleeves, glancing down at his polished shoes with a hint of self-consciousness. "I feel out of place," he admitted. Rachel gave him a gentle look. "Just be yourself. Help serve. Talk to them if they want to talk. That's enough." Together, they opened the trunk and lifted out the containers, Daniel carrying 2 at a time while Rachel lugged a large thermal bag. As they approached, a few heads turned. A group of men in threadbare jackets paused their conversation to stare, while a woman clutching a small child's hand watched warily. But recognition dawned in some of their eyes when they saw Rachel. "It's the soup lady," a gravelly voice called out. An older man emerged from behind a makeshift shelter, using a crutch to navigate the uneven ground. "Didn't expect you this early, Miss Rachel." She smiled. "We've got some rice and stew today, Thomas. Enough for everyone, I hope." She glanced at Daniel. "And this is Daniel. He's giving me a hand." Daniel forced a warm nod, unsure of how to approach. He was used to tight-lipped board presentations, not forging small talk with folks struggling at the edges of society, but Thomas simply returned the nod, his eyes flicking over Daniel's neat attire, then relaxing. "Glad to have any help we can get?" They found a relatively flat surface near a broken folding table. Rachel wiped it down and arranged the containers. Several more residents ambled over. Curiosity piqued. A slender woman named Shauna offered to organize the line, calling out to others who might still be dozing in their tents. Soon, a small crowd formed. Following Rachel's lead, Daniel popped open lids and placed them in warming trays. He ladled portions of stew, passing them into extended hands. The line shuffled forward in orderly fashion, hungry faces, grateful nods, murmurs of "thanks," "appreciate you," "God bless." Some exchanged words with Rachel, updating her on their situation. A missing job application, a new cough, a broken heater. She asked questions, offered tissues, or simply listened. Daniel watched, fascinated by her gentle empathy. And so it went. Many who came up for food eyed Daniel with caution, but as the minutes passed, the tension subsided. He began to greet them with a simple, "Good morning," handing out carefully scooped servings of rice and stew. His eyes drifted to a child in a too-thin jacket, rummaging through a plastic bag for a battered toy. Another toddler clutched her mother's arm, face streaked with dirt. The sight ignited a pang in his chest, sharper than any stress from corporate negotiations. He gritted his teeth, wishing he had come here sooner. One man, tall and gaunt, approached timidly. "You with some church or something?" he asked Daniel, glancing at the containers. Daniel shook his head. "No, I work in an office downtown. Just wanted to help out. Rachel does all the cooking, really." He gestured to her. The man nodded, taking the meal. "Been out of work 6 months. They shut down the plant where I did maintenance. Lost my apartment after that. This helps keep me going." He managed a rueful smile before moving on. By the time the line dwindled, nearly 50 meals had been handed out. Folks ate in scattered groups, perched on crates or leaning against old tires. Rachel kept an eye on them, occasionally handing out second helpings. Daniel set aside a final tray for a couple families who had yet to appear, then wiped sweat from his brow. The morning sun was higher now, and the late summer warmth felt oppressive in the bare lot. He glanced around, taking in how fragile everything was. Tents that might blow away in a strong wind, tarps that leaked in the rain, blankets too thin to ward off winter's chill. He spotted an older woman rummaging in a pile of clothes by a barrel, selecting a jacket that someone had likely donated. Nearby, a small group coughed quietly as they sat around a makeshift fire pit. Rachel stepped up beside him. "Heavy, isn't it?" she murmured, seeing it for the first time. He swallowed the lump in his throat. "It's worse than I imagined. I had no idea so many families were out here. Children." She nodded, her expression sorrowful. "The shelters fill up fast. Some people have dogs or mental health struggles. Others get turned away for lack of ID. It's a broken system. This lot is one of the only spaces they can still occupy without immediate eviction." Daniel ran a hand over the back of his neck, a surge of frustration building. "Isn't there some city-funded alternative? Anything?" Rachel gave a mirthless smile. "The city tries. Nonprofits too. But resources are stretched thin. Some folks can't meet the shelter's strict rules, or they feel safer here in their own tent than in an overcrowded dorm. Problems go on and on." He turned to face her, the sun catching in his eyes. "I want to help more. Not just with the food, the company. I have connections, finances. Maybe we can find a solution. Purchase or lease a property. Set up a proper temporary shelter, or at least a transitional space while they look for jobs. Something more secure." A spark of hope lit Rachel's expression. That's huge. It's not simple, though. You'd have to talk to city officials, get permits, staff it, fund operations. It's a massive undertaking. "I'm aware, but if not me, then who?" Daniel's voice burned with sincerity. He gazed over the camp, posture stiffening with resolve. "We can't fix every problem overnight, but we can start. Wilson Enterprises might even have vacant properties from old acquisitions. Let me do some digging." Rachel studied him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a tinge of worry. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Absolutely," he replied, placing a hand over his heart. "Seeing this, it's changed my perspective. I can't just go back to the office and pretend I don't know." Before Rachel could respond, a soft cry broke out to their left. A woman in her 20s was leaning against a makeshift pole, clutching her forehead. Rachel immediately hurried over, motioning for Daniel to follow. The woman had faint bruises on her arms. She looked feverish, trembling as she tried to steady herself. The child at her side tugged at her shirt, eyes wide with worry. "What happened, Amy?" Rachel asked gently, pressing her palm to the woman's forehead. "You've got a fever." I'm just tired," Amy mumbled, sweat beading on her brow. "Didn't sleep. My daughter's been coughing all night." Her child blinked up at Rachel, tears threatening to spill. Rachel turned, catching Daniel's eye. "Daniel, can you grab one of the blankets from the car? And water, if there's any left?" He nodded, rushing back to the trunk, rummaging for the emergency supplies he'd brought. Adrenaline spiked in his veins. Just moments ago, he was thinking about large-scale plans. Now a single mother was collapsing in front of him. He returned with a blanket and a couple bottles of water, kneeling beside them. "Here," he murmured, offering the water first. "Drink slowly." Amy nodded in thanks, sipping carefully. Rachel draped the blanket around her shoulders, then gave the little girl a comforting pat on the back. "Have you seen a doctor recently?" Amy shook her head, tears brimming. "No insurance, and the free clinic. Line was too long. I gave up." Daniel clenched his jaw, frustration flaring again. He put a hand on Rachel's shoulder, voice tight with concern. "Let's see if we can at least get her somewhere safe today. Maybe the hospital can't turn her away for an emergency." Rachel nodded, gently helping Amy to her feet. The child clung to her mother, scared. "We can try the county hospital," she said. "They have to treat urgent cases." Everything shifted with a single crisis. The realities of the camp felt heavier than ever. Daniel took a moment to catch his breath, then lowered his voice. "I'll drive. You stay in the back with them." Rachel's eyes flicked up at him, relief evident. "Thank you." She turned to gather her things, leaving Daniel alone with the weight of the moment for a second. He watched as other camp residents looked on, each with their own tragedies and hardships. He'd known this trip would be illuminating, but the immediacy of need, the raw vulnerability, this was beyond what he'd pictured. He swallowed hard, helping Amy walk toward Rachel's car. The woman's daughter scurried beside them, fear etched in her small face. Behind them, tents rustled in a passing breeze, plastic tarps flapping in the rising heat. The clang of an empty can echoed from a corner. Everything felt unbearably fragile. In that swirl of emotions, Daniel glimpsed Rachel's expression. Gentleness mingled with fierce resolve. She gave him a quick nod of thanks. He realized in that moment that her caring wasn't just a hobby or a volunteer pastime. It was a calling rooted in compassion he hadn't seen in many people, and he found himself determined, more than ever, to protect that spark in her, to amplify it, to do something that would truly matter. With Amy leaning on Rachel for support, Daniel guided them toward the old sedan. So many questions churned in his mind. He didn't know how to solve everything, but at least he could try. One mother, one family, one small step at a time. And right now, that first step involved taking them to a hospital, no matter the cost or inconvenience. He only prayed it wouldn't be too late for Amy or her daughter. If nothing else, his vow stood firm. He would not walk away from what he'd seen. As he opened the car door, Daniel cast one last glance over the camp, then at Rachel. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Their eyes revealed a shared resolution. And so they loaded up once more, the battered car rattling as he started the engine, a new sense of purpose guiding them away from the makeshift world of tattered tents and onto the streets that would lead them, hopefully, toward help and hope for at least these two souls. When Daniel Wilson pulled up to the county hospital's curb, he felt out of his element. The dull brick facade, the chipped paint of the curbs, the frenetic bustle of ambulances arriving, all of it clashed with the sleek, state-of-the-art buildings he was used to. Yet here he was, parking an old sedan with a pale-faced woman named Amy slumped in the back seat and a frightened little girl gripping her mother's sleeve. Rachel stepped out swiftly, motioning for Daniel to help Amy. Before he could second-guess protocol, he eased the sick woman's arm across his shoulders and guided her through the automatic doors. The hospital's waiting area was crowded, the outdated chairs lined with anxious faces. A toddler cried in a corner. An elderly man clutched his chest while a nurse escorted him elsewhere. This was the grim front line of public health care for the uninsured. Long waits, overwhelmed staff, a revolving door of emergencies. Rachel approached the front desk, helping Amy stay upright. The receptionist barely glanced up from her computer. "Name?" she asked in a routine monotone. "I'm Amy Martin," the young mother said weakly. Rachel added gently, "She's running a high fever, dizzy spells, and she has a little one who might be sick too. We need a doctor." The receptionist typed a few entries, eyebrows pinching. "Do you have insurance, Ms. Martin?" Amy gave a small shake of her head, eyes wavering with tears. "No," she murmured. "I lost my job. We live—" Her words caught. She didn't dare mention the homeless camp. Maybe shame, maybe fear of judgment. Rachel's features tightened with empathy. She leaned in. "Isn't there a law that says you have to treat urgent cases, insurance or not?" The receptionist's gaze flicked up, a hint of exasperation on her face. "We do, but the wait time can be several hours if it's not deemed life-threatening. She should fill out these forms." She slid a clipboard across the counter. "We'll triage her as soon as possible. Next, please." Daniel felt something hot twist in his gut. He glanced around. People in pain, many uninsured, all slotted into a system that simply had too few resources. At Wilson Enterprises, if something needed fixing, he was used to throwing money, staff, or technology at it. But here, he sensed the reality was bigger than a single check could solve. "Let's go sit," Rachel suggested, steadying Amy. They found seats near a flickering TV. The little girl climbed onto her mother's lap, sniffling. Daniel studied them with a pang of helplessness. Amy's face was flushed, her hair plastered to her forehead. Rachel removed a water bottle from her bag, offering it gently. "We'll wait," she said softly, though her eyes spoke of dismay at how long it might be. Daniel stood behind them, hands in his pockets. The father in him, though he'd never married or had children, ached at the sight of a young mother struggling with no safety net. The businessman in him wanted to barge up to the front desk and demand immediate care, but he knew that wouldn't solve the core issue. So he pulled out his phone and stepped aside to call one of his corporate contacts, a friend who happened to work on the hospital's board. "I know it's sudden," Daniel said quietly into the phone, pacing near a vending machine, "but a young mother's in urgent need. Yes, I'm at County General. If there's any way to expedite—" He listened to the reply, face grim. "Thank you. Anything you can do. Please hurry." When he returned, Rachel looked up, half surprised. "Did you call someone?" Daniel nodded, cheeks warming. "A contact on the hospital's board. I don't know if it'll help, but maybe they can push things forward." Rachel's tense posture eased a fraction. "I appreciate it," she said, then hesitated. "I'm not used to people with connections. I usually just wait it out like everyone else." Daniel didn't miss the quiet reproach in her tone. But it wasn't directed at him personally. It was directed at a system that forced people to rely on pull or luck when they should have guaranteed care. He looked down at Amy and her child, the little girl blinking up at him with half-trusting, half-frightened eyes. Sighing, he settled beside them. "Hang in there," he said softly, offering a gentle smile to the child. "We'll do our best." Time dragged. Daniel glanced at the clock. 45 minutes crawled by in the stuffy waiting room. The overhead lights buzzed, the TV droned. Finally, a nurse emerged calling, "Ms. Amy Martin?" They hurried over. The nurse, checking a chart, said briskly, "We can take you to triage." She eyed Daniel and Rachel. "Only one person can accompany her." Rachel's gaze flitted to Daniel, uncertain, but he nodded. "You go," he insisted. "I'll stay with her daughter. She might feel more comfortable with another woman helping." The nurse led them off, Amy leaning heavily on Rachel's arm. That left Daniel standing near a cluster of chairs with a small child who looked no older than 5 or 6. The girl clutched a ragged stuffed bunny, eyes darting around the busy room. Daniel felt awkward, unsure how to comfort a little one he barely knew, but he cleared his throat and crouched to her level. "Hi, what's your name?" he asked gently. She peeked up, hugging the bunny to her chest. "Sarah," came the shy response. "I'm Daniel," he said, trying a small smile. "Your mom will be okay. They'll help her feel better." Sarah nodded silently, eyes still wide. He could see the worry etched into her small features. Impulsively, he reached into his pocket for a phone, but realized that might not be the best approach. Instead, he looked around for something to distract her. The TV in the corner was set to a local news channel. Next to it, a small table had a few battered children's books. He walked over, plucked one out, a thin dog-eared story about a friendly dinosaur, then returned, sitting beside her. "I could read this to you," he offered. She hesitated, then scooched closer. He began reading the simple story, stumbling a bit over the cartoonish dinosaur's lines, but trying his best to sound animated. As the dinosaur embarked on a picnic with its prehistoric pals, Daniel sensed Sarah relaxing. She even gave a slight giggle at the silly pictures. For Daniel, each moment felt surreal. He was a CEO used to controlling board meetings and press conferences. Now he was perched on a wobbly chair in an overcrowded ER reading a children's book about dinosaurs to a kid he'd met less than an hour ago. Halfway through the story, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his contact from the hospital board. Daniel answered in a hushed voice, stepping a foot away. "Yes? You did? Thank you. Yes, I appreciate it very much." Hanging up, he exhaled relief. Apparently, they were fast-tracking Amy's tests. He turned back to Sarah, who was still hugging her bunny. "Good news. They're taking special care of your mommy," he told her. Sarah nodded, eyes drifting to the waiting room's entrance. Daniel realized she was watching every person who walked in, tense and afraid. She probably couldn't remember a time she felt safe. He wanted to wrap her in assurance, but all he had were words and a worn book about a cartoon dinosaur. 15 minutes later, Rachel emerged, motioning him over. "They're running tests," she explained in a low voice. "She's dehydrated and likely has a bad infection, but they're admitting her for a day or two. At least they can give her fluids and antibiotics. She's terrified about leaving Sarah alone. She wants to ask if we can watch her until she's discharged." Daniel glanced at the child, heart clenching. "Of course," he said without hesitation. "We'll figure it out. Is there any family or friend who—" Rachel shook her head. She hasn't been in touch with any relatives. Sometimes that's the story in the camp. Burned bridges or no one left to rely on. She sighed. "I could keep Sarah with me at my apartment for a couple days. It's small, but it's better than the camp." Daniel nodded, relieved. "I'm willing to cover any costs, food, clothes, whatever you need. And maybe I can call around for a motel if you prefer more space." Rachel hesitated, a hint of warmth creeping into her eyes at his offer. "We'll see. Might be best if she stays with me where it's more home-like, I guess. I just have to be sure I can manage working nights. Maybe one of the other volunteers can babysit, or—" She trailed off, chewing her lip. "This is tricky. I'm not exactly set up to be a foster parent." Daniel frowned sympathetically. "Is there a social worker here who can help?" He glanced around the waiting area. Rachel's brow furrowed. "They'll assign someone, but the process can be slow. If Amy can get back on her feet quickly, she might not lose custody. For now, let's just do what we can. Keep Sarah safe and fed." He paused, placing a hand lightly on Rachel's arm. "Thank you," he said, voice quiet. "You do so much. It's not just the food. You're basically a lifeline for people." She looked up, cheeks coloring. "I do what I can. You're helping too, you know." Then, remembering the little girl listening, she lowered her voice. "I'll go talk to the nurse about next steps for Sarah. Will you keep an eye on her in the meantime?" Daniel swallowed. "Of course. We'll keep reading about dinosaurs. She seems to like that." Rachel offered a tight, grateful smile and headed back toward the triage area. Daniel returned to Sarah, who gazed up with large eyes. He sat down, opened the book again. Only this time, as he started to read, the child quietly scooted onto his lap. He froze, startled by the sudden trust. Carefully, he balanced the book, arm half encircling her small form. He resumed reading, his voice soft, and Sarah leaned her head on his chest. The ache in Daniel's heart swelled, both sadness for her situation and an unexpected protective warmth. In his world of mergers and acquisitions, he'd rarely felt such a direct call to care for someone, yet here she was, a tiny child who needed comfort, and for some reason, she'd chosen to trust him. By the time Rachel returned with a tired nod, Daniel had finished the dinosaur story. Sarah had fallen asleep on his lap, still clutching her bunny. Rachel paused, seeing the scene, a poignant look crossing her face. She knelt beside them, speaking quietly. "Amy's stable for now. They're starting an IV. She asked me to promise we'll look after Sarah until she's out." Daniel nodded gently, glancing down at the dozing girl. "We will, whatever it takes." A hush settled between them, broken only by the distant beep of monitors and the muffled buzz of hospital activity. For a moment, Daniel and Rachel exchanged a look, no longer just CEO and cleaning staff, or just two accidental acquaintances. They were people thrust together in a crisis, forging an unspoken bond of responsibility and compassion. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked softly, as if noticing the strain in his posture. Daniel exhaled, brushing a hand across his forehead. "This is new to me. I handle deals worth millions, but I feel more pressure here than I do in those boardrooms." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "It's real life," she said. "It tends to do that." He nodded, then carefully shifted to support Sarah's weight. "So, what's our plan? We can't stay in the hospital all day, and you need to rest. You've been working all night." Rachel thought a moment. "I'll speak to the volunteer network. Maybe one of them can help watch Sarah while I sleep for a few hours. Later I'll pick her up and bring her to my place. Tomorrow I'm off, so that helps." Daniel frowned. "I don't want to just dump all this on you. I can pitch in, offer my place, but, well, that might be too weird for her. A big, empty penthouse." He grimaced, thinking how alien that would feel to a little girl used to tent life with her mom. Rachel shook her head. "Let's not uproot her too much. My apartment's small but cozy. Just help me cover anything she needs. Clothes, food, maybe some fun kids' activities so she's not scared. Then, once Amy's discharged, we can see if she's strong enough to go back. Or maybe we can help them find a safer option." The exhaustion was evident in her eyes, but also an unshakable determination. Daniel felt a surge of admiration. "All right, let's do that. I'll talk to my CFO about setting up a small emergency fund through the company's philanthropic budget. If that's okay with you?" Her eyes widened in relief. "That would be incredible. The volunteers usually scrape together donations, but having an official fund could change so many lives." He nodded, glancing at the sleeping child. "We'll start small, but eventually, maybe we can expand." At that moment, Sarah stirred, rubbing her eyes. She gazed around, confusion flickering until her gaze found Daniel's face, then Rachel's. She clung to Daniel's suit jacket, a silent question on her features. Rachel offered a comforting hand. "Your mommy's all right," she whispered. "They're helping her. You'll come with me for a little while, okay? Mr. Daniel will help us too." Sarah blinked, still drowsy. "Okay," she mumbled, clutching her bunny. Daniel gently stood, lifting Sarah. She was surprisingly light, a testament to the poor nutrition she'd likely had. He followed Rachel toward the exit, where a nurse asked them to fill out a contact form for the hospital's records. "We'll notify you when Ms. Martin is stable," the nurse said. "But she'll be here a couple of days at least." They nodded. Outside, the late morning sun hit them, stinging their tired eyes. The battered sedan sat where they'd left it, a stark contrast to the lines of polished cars belonging to doctors and staff. Daniel exhaled slowly, helping Sarah into the back seat. As he clicked her seatbelt, he glanced back at Rachel. "I know you're exhausted. Let me drive back," he said, fishing out his own car keys, then catching himself with a wry laugh. "Wait, that's right. My SUV's at the office. We only have your car." Rachel's tired smile quirked up. "You want to drive this thing?" "Sure," he shrugged. "I can handle it if you want to rest a bit in the passenger seat." A quiet, surprised chuckle escaped her as she tossed him the keys. "Guess you really are serious about helping," she murmured. Moments later, Daniel eased into the driver's seat of a vehicle that had seen better days. Worn seats, a dashboard with a crack, the faint smell of engine oil. Rachel settled beside him, folding her arms as if bracing for a bumpy ride. Sarah curled up with her bunny in the back, eyelids drooping again. As Daniel navigated through city traffic, Rachel gave directions to her small apartment complex on the outskirts of town. The tension slowly ebbed from the space between them. They'd made it through the chaos of the hospital check-in, and although Amy still needed medical care, at least she was in safe hands. Now the smaller matter of caring for Sarah loomed, and with it, a deeper question. Where exactly did they go from here, once the immediate crisis subsided? A stoplight turned red, and Daniel paused. He glanced sideways at Rachel, noticing her lashes flutter, struggling to stay awake. He lowered his voice. "Hey," he said gently, "close your eyes for a bit. It's a 20-minute drive. I'll wake you when we're there." She gave a small nod, too tired to argue. Within minutes, her head leaned against the window, sleep claiming her. In the rearview mirror, Sarah dozed as well, hugging her bunny. Daniel drove on, the city passing by in a blur of concrete windows and fleeting faces. His mind whirled with plans. Reaching out to the CFO about a small emergency fund, looking into vacant properties that could be converted into temporary housing, organizing with local nonprofits. None of these ideas had fully formed, but the seed was planted. At another stoplight, he gazed at the two sleeping figures. One, a determined night shift cleaner who had captured his respect and admiration. The other, a vulnerable child who, in a few short hours, had come to trust him enough to fall asleep in his care. Daniel Wilson, the famously driven CEO, had never imagined such a scene would be part of his life. Yet it felt oddly right. A sense of quiet responsibility settled on his shoulders, more significant than any business deal. The light turned green. As the car lurched forward, Daniel pressed his lips into a line. He had the resources to help if he dared push against the usual corporate caution. He just needed to keep that ember of purpose alive. Because looking at Rachel's exhausted face and thinking of Amy in that hospital bed, he couldn't turn away. Not anymore. Rachel's apartment was a modest complex made up of dull beige buildings, each 3 stories high. The parking lot, riddled with potholes, was mostly empty at midday. Daniel steered the old sedan into a guest spot near the entrance and cut the engine. Through the windshield, he noticed rows of tiny balconies outfitted with second-hand chairs or plants in plastic pots, small touches of life in an otherwise gray setting. The vibe was quiet and unassuming, a far cry from the luxurious high-rises where Daniel was used to conducting business. He twisted around to check on the others. Sarah slept soundly in the back seat, her face tucked against the tattered bunny. Rachel, who dozed off as well, woke with a start when Daniel spoke her name gently. "Hey," he said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "We're here. Thought you'd like a few extra minutes of rest?" She blinked groggily, then stretched her arms. "Thanks," she murmured. "I really needed that." Glancing out the window, she added, "I'm on the 2nd floor, apartment 2B. They carefully roused Sarah, who clung shyly to Rachel's side. Daniel fished a couple of plastic grocery bags from the trunk, containing some emergency kids' snacks and a small coloring book he'd picked up at a nearby corner store before heading here. He'd wanted to be prepared for at least the next few hours. Up a short flight of external stairs, Rachel unlocked the door to 2B. The interior was tiny but tidy, with a narrow galley kitchen that opened into a living area furnished with a second-hand couch and a small TV. The walls had a few framed pictures, scenic landscapes rather than personal photos, and the entire space smelled faintly of lavender, likely from the all-purpose cleaning solution she used. "Sorry it's cramped," Rachel said, cheeks flushing slightly. "I don't have a spare bedroom or anything." Daniel shook his head. "It's cozy," he replied earnestly, though he was indeed used to a much larger living space. "Looks like you keep it spotless. Makes sense, given your cleaning expertise." She offered a sheepish grin, then guided Sarah to the couch. "Sit here, sweetie. Let's see what Mr. Daniel brought, okay?" Daniel set the grocery bags on the small coffee table. As Sarah peered inside, finding apple juice boxes, a pack of crackers, and the coloring book, her eyes lit with cautious excitement. She glanced from Daniel to Rachel as if seeking permission. Rachel nodded gently. "Go ahead, pick something to snack on. We'll figure out lunch soon." While the girl settled in, Daniel took a moment to absorb the scene. Outside, he heard the muffled sounds of neighbors, a TV playing next door, footsteps overhead. Rachel's living area was brightened by a single window facing the parking lot, its curtains drawn open to let in the midday sun. A modest bookshelf stood in the corner, lined with worn paperbacks and some folded linens. The decor was minimal, no fancy throw pillows, no high-end electronics. Still, the place felt warm and lived in, reflecting Rachel's practical nature. After ensuring Sarah was comfortable, Rachel stepped into the kitchen area. "I'll make some tea," she announced softly, busying herself with an electric kettle. The exhaustion still clung to her movements, but Daniel could sense her determination to keep going. He followed, leaning against the small counter, lowering his voice so Sarah couldn't hear. "You should get some real rest soon. I can stay here for a bit and watch Sarah while you nap, if that helps." Rachel paused, considering him. "I don't want to impose. You probably have a million things waiting at the office." A faint wry smile curved his lips. "They can wait a little longer. My CFO can handle immediate tasks, and to be honest," he glanced at Sarah, who was coloring quietly, "this feels more important right now. Amy's depending on us." Rachel exhaled, shoulders sagging with gratitude. "Okay, just for a couple of hours, then I'll see if one of the volunteers can help. I have a shift tonight, I can't afford to miss it." Daniel frowned at that. "You're working again tonight? You just finished a full overnight, had to deal with the camp, the hospital. You're human, Rachel. You need sleep." She gave a half shrug. "I don't have paid days off. If I skip shifts, my paycheck shrinks, and I have rent, bills, plus groceries for the camp. Every dollar counts." A surge of protectiveness flared in Daniel. He realized how precarious her situation was, an hourly wage that left no room for emergencies, let alone a day of rest. "Let me cover your lost wages for a day or two," he offered, trying to sound casual. "Consider it a personal favor. Call it a donation if that feels better." Her eyes flicked up in mild surprise. "Daniel, you don't have to." "I want to," he pressed gently. "You're taking on more than you should, and we need you healthy. Besides, Sarah needs someone stable right now. I can't just leave you struggling." She hesitated, pride warring with relief. Eventually, she whispered, "All right, just for tonight then. Thank you. I hate feeling indebted." "You're not indebted. You're deserving," he said, meeting her gaze firmly. "It's the least I can do." Rachel nodded, turning to grab teacups. Daniel saw tension easing in her posture. He understood how uncomfortable it might be to accept monetary help, but he also recognized her sincerity. She wasn't trying to take advantage. She simply had nowhere else to turn, and he, for his part, felt a compelling urge to support her. Minutes later, they brought steaming cups of chamomile tea into the living area. Sarah sipped apple juice, absorbed in coloring a playful cat illustration from the book Daniel had bought. Rachel sank onto the couch, giving the little girl a warm smile. "Do you like those crayons?" Sarah nodded shyly, continuing to fill in the cat's fur with purple scribbles. Daniel sat in a simple wooden chair that looked like it had come from a thrift store, balancing his teacup on one knee. He took in the calm scene, an odd contrast to the harrowing hours at the homeless camp and hospital. For a moment, normalcy reigned. A tired but caring woman, a quiet child, a helpful visitor, almost like a makeshift family moment. His phone buzzed, snapping him from the spell. Checking the screen, he saw the CFO's number. "I should take this," he murmured. Rachel gave an understanding nod, so he stepped outside onto the small landing by the front door. "Hey," he said quietly. "Thanks for calling back. Look, I need your help setting up a small emergency fund. Personal philanthropic line item. Yes, immediate. We'll start with a modest sum for homeless assistance, medical bills, that sort of thing. He listened, shoulders tensing at the CFO's cautious tone. I understand the board needs transparency. We'll keep it discreet for now. But I need you to trust me. I'll handle any questions that come up. Right. Let's just allocate a portion of the philanthropic budget we underspent last quarter. Yes, that's an order. Thanks. He ended the call, exhaling. Managing corporate philanthropy had always been a matter of signing off on carefully vetted initiatives or donating to well-known charities. This was different, a direct, urgent response to an immediate crisis. That made it unorthodox, but Daniel felt no regret. For the first time in a long while, he felt his company's resources could really impact individuals he'd personally encountered. When he slipped back inside, Rachel was coaxing Sarah to finish her crackers. A wave of warmth swept through him at the domestic scene. "Everything okay?" Rachel asked, eyeing him. He mustered a faint grin. "Yes, just handling some details about that emergency fund. It's in motion." Rachel's gaze softened. "You work fast. I don't even know how to thank you." He shrugged slightly. "I just wish I'd started sooner. Let's not lose momentum. Once Amy's stable, we'll see how many more we can help." A half hour passed, the small talk drifting gently between them as Sarah quietly played. Eventually, Rachel's eyelids drooped, exhaustion claiming her again. Daniel noticed her struggling to keep her head from bobbing. Setting down his empty teacup, he said, "Go rest now. I'll stay with Sarah. I promise I'll be here." She resisted at first, but fatigue was too strong. Giving Sarah a reassuring pat on the knee, Rachel pointed to a bedroom door off the living room. "I'll just be in there if you need me," she murmured. "Don't let me sleep more than a couple of hours." Daniel nodded. "Deal." She shuffled away, leaving the door ajar in case Sarah needed anything. The hush that followed was filled by the soft scratch of crayons on paper, the hum of the apartment's refrigerator, and the faint traffic outside. Daniel stayed near Sarah, asking about her drawing. She responded in monosyllables, still adjusting to having him around, but she no longer shied away. He managed to make her laugh once, by joking that the purple cat she colored might need a bright green mouse friend. She giggled at the idea, and her smile, fleeting though it was, warmed Daniel's heart. He thought about the house he owned, just across town, big enough to host entire dinner parties, yet usually empty. He pictured how Sarah might dash around exploring the huge living room or big windows. But then he realized how alien it might feel, another abrupt shift from everything she'd known. Stability was key, and right now Rachel's cozy one-bedroom offered more comfort than a sprawling penthouse. Time dragged slowly. Sarah eventually started yawning, and Daniel helped her find a few pillows to curl up on the couch. She dozed, lulled by the warmth of the midday sun streaming through the window. Daniel took the opportunity to check his emails, responding to urgent messages from investors and board members. The normalcy of corporate demands felt jarring in this humble setting, but he managed, typing quickly on his phone while glancing occasionally at Sarah's sleeping form to ensure she was still comfortable. An hour and a half passed, then 2. Daniel worried about waking Rachel too soon, but he also remembered her instructions. At the 2-hour mark, he stood and tapped quietly on her bedroom door. A muffled, "Yes?" came from inside. He eased it open slightly. Rachel, blinking herself awake, sat up in a small bed covered by a faded quilt. Even half asleep, she looked relieved and a bit embarrassed. "I can't believe I slept that long," she murmured, pushing hair from her face. "You needed it," Daniel replied gently. "And Sarah's been fine. She's napping too, so it's pretty peaceful out here." Rachel smiled gratefully. "Thank you. You must be bored stiff." He shook his head. "Not at all. I've been responding to emails. Actually, it's nice to do something real, beyond spreadsheets and phone calls. Also, I might have looked around." You keep a very clean closet." She let out a quiet laugh. "Old habits," she said with a sheepish shrug. Then her expression turned serious. "I do appreciate this. No one's ever done anything like this for me, covering my shift, helping me with everything." Daniel met her eyes. "I'm glad I can. And it's not just for you. It's for Amy, for Sarah, for the other people in the camp. But yes, I won't lie. I like being able to help you personally. You're—" He paused, uncertain how to phrase it without overstepping. "You're inspiring, Rachel." A delicate pink colored her cheeks. She looked down. "I just try to do what's right," she whispered, voice catching. "Life's been tough, so I guess I can't ignore how tough it is for others." Something unspoken hung in the air between them for a moment, a quiet understanding of each other's deeper drives. Then Rachel cleared her throat and swung her legs over the side of the bed. "I should check on Sarah, see if she wants a proper lunch, and then I'll call some volunteers to set up a babysitting schedule. I have to figure out how to do all this until Amy's out of the hospital." Daniel moved aside to let her pass. "I can help coordinate if you'd like. Maybe I can sweeten the deal with a little financial support for them too, cover gas or groceries for whoever assists." She glanced up with a grateful expression. "That would mean a lot. I know at least 2 or 3 folks who help in the mornings. We just have to juggle schedules. Most of them have part-time jobs too." Together they emerged into the living area. Sarah stirred at the sound of their footsteps, blinking awake. She eyed Rachel, then Daniel, with the gentle acceptance only a child can show when trusting adults to guide them. Rachel kneeled beside the couch. "Hey there, sweet girl. Want some lunch?" she asked softly. "I think I have some peanut butter and jelly." Sarah nodded, looking over at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging smile. "I'll help," he said. "We can set up a real feast. Milk, sandwiches, maybe some fruit if you have any." Rachel ruffled through her small fridge. She found half a container of strawberries, a carton of milk, and the last few slices of bread. It was enough to piece together a decent meal. Watching them assemble sandwiches in that tiny kitchen, Daniel couldn't help but reflect on how drastically his day had changed from the norm. Instead of corporate deals, he was cutting crusts off bread for a child in need, and it felt right. As they ate, the conversation stayed light. Rachel asked Sarah about her favorite color. Daniel teased that he was a terrible sandwich maker but tried his best. The little girl managed a few small smiles. It wasn't the carefree laughter of a child who felt safe in the world, but it was something. After lunch, Rachel set her phone to speaker mode, calling one of her volunteer friends. A woman named Teresa answered, and Rachel explained the situation. Amy was hospitalized, Sarah needed temporary supervision, and Rachel was short on time because of her own job. Teresa agreed to help, at least for a few hours each day, though she had limited availability because of her own children and a waitressing job. While Rachel and Teresa hashed out details, Daniel caught glimpses of the wider community network Rachel was part of. People with big hearts, small wallets, and complicated schedules. Yet they managed to step up for each other despite the challenges. He made a mental note to reimburse Teresa for any expenses. Eventually, the plan took shape. Sarah would stay with Rachel at night, since Rachel wasn't working this evening thanks to Daniel's help. Teresa would watch Sarah for a chunk of tomorrow while Rachel slept. If Amy improved, she might be released by then. If not, they'd shuffle again. It was a patchwork arrangement, but they'd make it work. Hanging up, Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. "Okay, so that's sorted for now." "Good," Daniel said, leaning against the counter. "Any word on Amy?" Rachel shook her head. "Not yet. I'll try calling the hospital soon. It's only been a few hours, so they might still be running tests." She looked toward Sarah, who was flipping through the coloring book again. "We just need to keep her routine as normal as possible." Daniel nodded in agreement, a sudden pang gripping his chest. He wondered how many other children at the camp lacked any routine, living day to day in uncertain conditions. "What if," he began thoughtfully, "we find a way to open a small daytime center for kids at the camp? Some place with basic educational materials, a safe space while parents look for work or attend doctor appointments. It wouldn't solve everything, but it might help. Rachel's eyes widened at the idea. It's ambitious. We'd need a location, volunteers, some licensing maybe. But the kids do fall through the cracks. Most are too young for school or can't register because they lack permanent addresses. He nodded, mind churning. I'll talk to a few people. Maybe we can partner with a nonprofit. And we have that philanthropic budget you mentioned. He caught her gaze. We'll try, step by step. She swallowed, emotion flickering across her features. You're truly extraordinary for even considering this, she whispered, voice tight with gratitude. I'm used to hearing no from officials. Yet here you are, a corporate CEO offering to help create real programs. It's like something out of a dream. He looked away, slightly embarrassed. I'm just a man who's been too blind for too long. You showed me there's more I can do than writing a token donation check once a year. Silence fell between them, charged with a subtle undercurrent of admiration, perhaps even closeness. Then Sarah's quiet voice broke in. Ms. Rachel, can I color outside? She pointed to the small balcony beyond the sliding glass door. Rachel blinked, glancing at Daniel as if for input. He smiled. Sure, he said, standing. Let's bring a chair out for you. It's a warm day. Soon, they'd set up a rickety folding chair on the tiny balcony, the coloring book on Sarah's lap while she soaked in the fresh air. Daniel pulled the door mostly shut, not wanting the child to overhear heavier topics. She's so calm, Daniel observed quietly. I expected more tears or anxiety. Rachel nodded, her voice low. She's likely in shock. Kids can be resilient, but that doesn't mean she's not scared. She's just coping the best she can. If her mom recovers quickly, maybe it'll be okay. He inched closer, lowering his tone. If not, we'll keep helping, yes? However long it takes. Yes, Rachel agreed, eyes soft. I won't abandon them, and I know you won't either. A soft hush wrapped around them. Daniel studied her face. She looked worn but resolute, a quiet flame of kindness burning in her gaze. In that moment, it struck him how alone she might have been in her mission before he stepped in, and how quickly a bond had formed between them. I should probably head back to the office soon, he said gently, though a part of him was reluctant to leave. I'll let you and Sarah settle in. Call me if anything changes, or if you need something from the store. I can pick up groceries, clothes, whatever. Rachel nodded, walking him to the door. Thank you again, Daniel, for everything. He gave a small smile. You're welcome. I'll be in touch. Then, hesitating, he added, Take care of yourself, too. Promise me you'll rest more tonight? Her lips curved in a faint grin. I'll try. You be safe driving back in my old car. He chuckled. Right. The real challenge here is not stalling that engine. She laughed lightly at that. They exchanged a final look, one that seemed to say much more than words could convey. Gratitude, trust, maybe the seeds of something deeper. Then Daniel stepped outside, leaving Rachel to close the door behind him. As he walked down the creaking stairs, the midday heat pressed against his skin. The battered sedan awaited him. He'd drive it back to the Wilson Enterprises building, retrieve his SUV, and face the swirl of corporate demands. But for now, his mind stayed on a small apartment with a courageous woman and a vulnerable little girl who had found a temporary haven within those cramped walls. At the bottom of the stairwell, he paused to glance up at the row of windows. Through one, he saw Sarah's tiny silhouette on the balcony, coloring in the mild breeze. He couldn't help but smile, a determined vow forming in his heart. He would not let the chaos of office life distract him from this new mission. Because behind every business figure or bottom-line statement stood real people. People in tents, in hospital beds, in modest apartments doing their best to help. And if he, as CEO, had the means to support them, how could he possibly turn away? His phone buzzed again. An assistant requesting updated contract terms for a client in Singapore. Daniel exhaled, pressing answer. But as he moved toward the car, he made a silent promise to himself and to Rachel. The homeless families, the children like Sarah, and the unstoppable caretaker that Rachel was, they would not become afterthoughts. Instead, they would be the spark for a brighter, more compassionate chapter in his life. And, if he had any say, in the future of Wilson Enterprises itself. Daniel Wilson pulled into the Wilson Enterprises parking garage, guiding Rachel's battered sedan into a discreet corner space. He turned off the engine with a sigh of relief. Somehow it had made the trip without sputtering out. While he'd grown fond of the car's character, he promised himself he'd have it serviced soon. He could only imagine the skepticism if one of his executives caught sight of him stepping out of such a vehicle. He retrieved his own keys from his pocket and made his way to the executive level, where his sleek black SUV awaited. The difference in comfort was jarring. The tinted windows, plush leather seats, polished dashboard, yet as he settled behind the wheel, all he could think about was Sarah's cautious smile and Rachel's weary determination. Even this luxurious ride felt strangely hollow after what he had experienced that day. 20 minutes later, he stepped off the private elevator leading to his top-floor office. His reflection in the glass doors revealed a man who looked composed, but inside, he felt like a whirlwind of new convictions. On his desk sat a stack of paperwork that needed attention, though his mind was far from spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Jillian, his efficient personal assistant, appeared in the doorway. She always carried herself with a crisp professionalism. Immaculate blouse, hair pinned back, her expression carefully neutral. "Good afternoon, Mr. Wilson," she said gently. "I have a few updates for you from the morning. Also, Mr. Rayburn from the board has called twice." Daniel hung his suit jacket, trying not to scowl. Rayburn. He's always uneasy about philanthropic spending. No doubt he wants an explanation about the sudden changes I've requested. Jillian nodded. Yes, he's asked for a meeting to discuss the reallocation of funds. Should I arrange a call? Daniel exhaled. Let me handle it personally. He sat down, adjusting his tie. What else do I need to address? She handed him a neat list. You have an online conference with Singapore in 1 hour. The CFO wants to confirm numbers for the philanthropic line you initiated, and your legal team is waiting for final signatures on the merger contract. Busy as always, the old Daniel Wilson might have breezed through these tasks with machine-like focus, but today he felt the weight of how disjointed it all seemed from the real troubles he'd witnessed. Thanks, Jillian, he said, flashing a tired smile. Could you get the CFO on the line in about 10 minutes? I want to confirm the philanthropic budget details. She agreed and left him alone. For a moment, Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The cityscape beyond his glass windows sprawled outward, skyscrapers, traffic, wealth on display. People below hustled to important jobs while just miles away families lived in tents on a vacant lot. It was a dizzying contrast. Straightening, he reached for the phone and dialed the CFO. The call rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Daniel, the CFO greeted, trying to sound cordial but clearly harboring questions. Thanks for taking my call, Daniel said. I want to finalize the budget shift for the Emergency Homelessness Initiative. We'll label it under Community Outreach to keep it straightforward. The CFO cleared his throat. Yes, about that. We have a philanthropic department that typically reviews these requests, ensures everything's in compliance. Are we certain we want to expedite it without the usual due diligence? Daniel drummed his fingers on the desk, tension tightening his jaw. I'm certain. People need immediate assistance. We can't wait months for a typical review process. Have the philanthropic manager note that I've personally approved a pilot fund. It's a fraction of our overall budget, but it'll make a difference. A pause. Understood. I'll prepare the official documents, but the board may raise questions about accountability and follow-up data. That's fine, Daniel replied firmly. I'm going to oversee this personally and coordinate with local volunteers. It won't be squandered, I promise you." They ended the call without further pushback. Daniel set the handset down, an odd sense of triumph mingling with impatience. He recognized the complexities, accountability, due diligence, all valid concerns. But for once, he believed speed mattered more than perfect paperwork. A beep signaled Jillian's discreet voice over the intercom. "Mr. Rayburn is on the line for you." Daniel steeled himself. This conversation would likely be more adversarial. "Go ahead," he told Jillian, then heard the click as Rayburn's deep voice came through. "Daniel," the board member said in a measured tone, "I've been informed of a new philanthropic line item. Might I ask for clarity on the nature of this fund? The staff is describing it as a personal initiative of yours." Daniel forced calm. "That's correct, Rayburn. A small portion of our philanthropic budget is being reallocated to assist homeless families, emergency shelter costs, medical bills, transitional support." Rayburn hummed, unimpressed. "We donate to recognized nonprofits already. This new direction, does it align with our brand strategy? We typically associate ourselves with educational grants, technology scholarships, that sort of thing." Daniel bit back a sharp retort, reminding himself to remain professional. "We can still do all of those," he said, "but I've come across an urgent need in our own community. I believe it's important for Wilson Enterprises to demonstrate direct impact, not just theoretical support. It's also beneficial for our public image to be seen addressing local issues." There was a pause. Then Rayburn sighed. "I just hope this is well managed and doesn't open us to liabilities or negative press if something goes awry. Homelessness can be complicated. It might not yield the tidy PR we're used to." Daniel's frustration flared, but he held it in check. "My office will ensure it's handled responsibly. Besides," he added pointedly, "our duty to society shouldn't be dictated solely by the neatness of press releases." "Very well," Rayburn conceded, though Daniel heard doubt in his voice. "We'll monitor results. Keep the board informed, will you?" "Of course," Daniel replied briskly, ending the call. He sat in silence, annoyance tingling in his veins. The constant need to justify philanthropy grated on him. Yet he couldn't entirely blame Rayburn. He was just another product of corporate culture, one Daniel had been part of for years. A culture that demanded profitability, measured everything in returns, and minimized risk. So, forging a path of raw human compassion was inevitably met with skepticism. Picking up a pen, he scribbled notes on a sticky pad. Check on Amy's hospital status. Draft a basic plan for a children's daytime program. Coordinate with nonprofits for potential partnerships. Remind Rachel to rest. He paused at that last line. Reminding Rachel to rest. An involuntary smile softened his features. She was so dedicated, so relentless in caring for people. Was it wrong that he found it incredibly endearing? Over the past couple of days, they'd gone from near strangers to cooperative allies, even sharing moments that felt intimately personal, like reading a dinosaur story to a frightened child in the ER waiting room. He shook his head, focusing back on tasks. Overthinking emotions wouldn't help right now. There was too much to do. The rest of the workday blurred into a flurry of conference calls. He signed off on the merger contract, ensuring the legal team that philanthropic considerations wouldn't interfere with the company's expansion goals. He participated in the Singapore call, where he navigated currency exchange details and shipping logistics. All the while, his mind lingered on images of that muddy, homeless camp. Amy in a hospital bed, Sarah quietly coloring, and Rachel valiantly trying to hold everything together. Finally, late afternoon rolled around, and Jillian stepped in with an apologetic expression. "Sir, you asked me to remind you. You had planned to check on Ms. Martin's hospital situation." Daniel frowned. So many tasks had flooded him that he nearly forgot. "Right. Thank you, Jillian." He dialed the hospital's main line requesting updates on Amy Martin. The operator put him through to a nurse's station. "Yes, a harried-sounding nurse said, scanning her notes. She's responding to IV fluids. The infection's serious, likely pneumonia, but her vitals are stabilizing. Doctors want to keep her at least another day to ensure she's strong enough to recover at home. Or, well, whatever home she has. Daniel felt relief at the good news. Has she been informed about her daughter? We've told her that the child is safe with friends, the nurse answered. Ms. Martin was anxious, but knowing her daughter's in good hands seemed to help her rest. He exhaled. That's wonderful. Thank you. If you could note that any bills or needed medication will be handled by me, Daniel Wilson, I'd appreciate it. My assistant can provide details. The nurse sounded surprised. That's unusual, but I'll pass it on. Thank you for your generosity. After the call, Daniel leaned back, satisfied that at least Amy was on the mend. He tapped out a text to Rachel. Just heard from the hospital. Amy's improving. They'll keep her another day. How's Sarah holding up? He stared at his phone, half expecting no immediate response, but a minute later it buzzed. Sarah's okay. She took a nap and is playing quietly. I might run to the store soon for dinner ingredients. The X for the update. Rachel. He typed back, let me know if you need anything. I can swing by later with groceries. Her reply was quick. We're fine for now. Focus on your job. See you tomorrow? He smiled wryly at her gentle admonition. See you tomorrow, he typed, though a part of him wished he could stop by her apartment that evening just to ensure they were truly fine. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. Eventually, the bright sky outside his windows shifted to sunset hues. Daniel wrapped up the day's final meeting, rose from his desk, and stretched. His reflection in the glass revealed tired eyes, but also a sense of renewed determination. As he rode down the elevator, he considered a short visit to a local grocery store. Rachel had insisted she was set, but maybe picking up a few extra supplies wouldn't hurt. Fresh fruits for Sarah, an array of simple meals for Rachel so she wouldn't have to cook from scratch when exhausted. He decided to do just that. Out on the street, he instructed his driver, who'd been standing by in case Daniel had another late-night shift, to take him to a high-end grocery store downtown. Usually he had staff handle these errands. Tonight he wanted to choose things himself. At the market, surrounded by organic produce and specialty items, Daniel couldn't help chuckling at how out of place he felt. He grabbed apples, bananas, a few vegetables he recalled Rachel using in her meals, some child-friendly snacks, and staples like cereal, milk, and bread. The cart was an odd mix of basics and slightly fancier items. He had no clue what brand of cereal Sarah liked, so he grabbed 2 or 3 bright boxes. Back in the SUV, he weighed the idea of driving straight to Rachel's place, but she'd told him not to worry for now. He glanced at the time. It was after 7. Perhaps dropping by unannounced might fluster her. Still, he felt uneasy leaving them without a backup plan if something came up. A compromise formed in his mind. He could deliver the groceries and leave quickly, just to ensure everything was okay. He texted, bought a few groceries. Outside your apartment in 15 mins, if that's all right? A pause. Then her response, you're persistent. Okay, come by. But I'm not letting you stay long. I don't want Sarah to get confused about who you are. He inhaled sharply at that. Confused about who he was? The words stung a little, but he understood. He was just a new figure in their lives, a CEO with resources, sure, but also an unknown male presence. Sarah had enough upheaval. Understood, he replied simply. See you soon. The drive was short. He climbed the apartment stairs with bags in hand, half embarrassed to realize he'd bought too much. Maybe Rachel had a small fridge. He shouldn't have gone overboard. But it was done. He knocked gently, hearing muffled footsteps. The door opened a crack. Rachel stood there wearing comfy lounge pants and a simple t-shirt, her hair down from its usual braid. She looked surprised. Maybe at the volume of groceries. Daniel, that's a lot, she said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. He offered a bashful shrug. I just grabbed whatever seemed useful. Sarah was at the coffee table, crayons scattered. She looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes, though she didn't rush over. Daniel offered her a small wave. "Hey, Sarah, I brought some apples and cereal. Maybe you'll like them." She nodded shyly, hugging her bunny to her chest. Rachel motioned to the kitchenette. "We can set those here." "Thank you." They carried the bags over and Daniel began unpacking fruit, bread, chicken, a carton of milk, and a couple of frozen pizzas. Rachel's eyes widened at each item. "You really didn't have to, but thank you. I guess we'll have plenty for a few days." Glancing around, Daniel kept his voice gentle. "If you change your mind about needing help or anything else, I'm always a call away. I know it's been a long day for you." She placed a bunch of bananas on the counter, studying them with a soft smile. "I appreciate it. Honestly, I'm still wrapping my head around how quickly everything changed. Amy in the hospital, Sarah here, you stepping in to help." He risked a half step closer, lowering his voice so the child couldn't hear. "Rachel, you've been doing this sort of thing by yourself for so long, helping the camp, cooking meals after your shifts. That's what amazes me. I'm just trying to keep up." Her expression flickered with gratitude, maybe something deeper. "Thanks," she murmured. "I guess we make a good team." Daniel nodded, warmth coiling in his chest. For a moment he wondered if that simple statement, "we make a good team," could lead to something more personal. But Sarah stirred on the couch and Rachel tore her gaze away, reminding him that this wasn't the time to complicate things. He stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should go. Don't want to outstay my welcome. Enjoy the groceries, and if anything comes up with Amy, let me know, all right?" She walked him to the door, offering a genuine smile. "I will. And Daniel, thank you again." Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then he slipped into the evening air, heading down the same stairs he'd climbed earlier that day. Darkness was settling over the complex, but a sense of purpose lit Daniel's thoughts. He knew the real work was just beginning. Funds needed organizing, nonprofits needed contacting, and the old system of ignoring the homeless crisis needed a serious shakeup. Yet, as he climbed into the SUV and pulled away, part of his thoughts stayed behind in that little apartment, with the exhausted woman who had inadvertently inspired him to chase more than profits and status, and the tiny girl coloring pictures of cartoon cats, who still believed the world might yet be a gentle place. The early morning sun bathed the city in a soft, golden light. High above the streets, Daniel Wilson gazed out his office windows, sipping his coffee with unusual impatience. It was just past 7, and he had already scanned the day's agenda: a strategy session with the marketing team, a planning meeting for a new tech launch, and yet another call with the board's finance committee. Typically, his routine was as neat and methodical as the sleek decor of his office. But now his mind kept drifting to a small apartment miles away. He set down his coffee mug, tapping a finger against his desk. He had sent Rachel a good morning text half an hour ago, something simple like, "Hope Sarah slept okay. Do you two need anything?" But hadn't received a reply. Possibly they were still asleep. It was a relief Rachel wasn't working overnight this time, thanks to his covering her shift pay, but he knew she was the type to wake early, especially with a child in her care. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Jillian, his assistant, stepped inside, holding a manila folder. "Morning, Mr. Wilson," she said in a polished tone. "I have the revised philanthropic documents you requested. We'll need your signature to finalize the fund distribution." He took the folder, opening it to skim the contents. "Thank you, Jillian. Everything looks in order?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. Legal reviewed it as well. I've updated the official statement so the board can see our objectives: emergency housing, medical aid, and transitional support for homeless families. A small portion is earmarked for direct relief as you instructed." Daniel scanned the neatly typed statements, feeling a quiet satisfaction. This was progress, an official policy within Wilson Enterprises to address the needs he'd witnessed firsthand. "Looks good," he said. "I'll sign it now." With a smooth flourish, he added his signature to each page. Jillian waited, then gathered the papers. "Perfect. I'll forward these to our philanthropic division. We should be able to release the initial funds by the end of today." He exhaled. "That's sooner than I expected." "Good. Let's coordinate with local groups for immediate use." She gave him a polite nod and left. Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting the relief sink in. This was only the start, he reminded himself, but at least it was real, tangible assistance. Unable to shake his concerns about Rachel and Sarah, he picked up his phone and dialed her directly. The line rang several times, each beep heightening his worry. Finally, she answered in a drowsy tone. "Hello?" He tried to sound casual. "Morning, Rachel. Everything okay there?" A rustling sound implied she was getting out of bed. "Sorry, I slept later than usual. Sarah's still conked out, I think." She yawned softly. "No crises, if that's what you're asking." "Good," Daniel said, some tension leaving his shoulders. "I just wanted to check in. Did the groceries help?" "They did," she answered with a small laugh. "We had strawberries for breakfast yesterday. Sarah's first time having them fresh, I think. She was so happy. I meant to thank you again." He smiled. "You're more than welcome. Have you heard from the hospital about Amy's status?" Rachel's voice hushed. "Yes, actually. They said she's doing better, might be released this afternoon. If that happens, I'll take Sarah over there so they can reunite." A surge of relief and excitement rushed through him. "That's wonderful news. I can come with you if that's all right. I'd like to see how Amy's doing and make sure there are no immediate issues with her returning to the camp." "Sure," Rachel said without hesitation, "but let me talk to Amy first. She's been anxious about going back to those conditions. She hinted she might try for a spot in a shelter if one's open." Daniel's mind flickered with ideas. "We could help. Maybe use some of the new philanthropic funds to cover a motel room short-term, or see if there's an available space in a transitional housing program." "That would be incredible," Rachel murmured. "I'll ask her. Meanwhile, Sarah will be overjoyed to see her mom." They said their goodbyes, and Daniel ended the call feeling lighter than he had all morning. Amy's potential discharge signaled a small victory, one life tangibly improved by a combination of Rachel's compassion and his resources. He turned his attention to the day's tasks, meeting with the marketing team first. Still, even as his staff discussed ad campaigns and brand positioning, Daniel's mind kept wandering back to the hospital. Around 11, while wrapping up a contract meeting, his phone vibrated with a text. "Amy is confirmed for release at 2 p.m. Going to the hospital at 1:30. Do you want to meet us there?" "Rachel." "Absolutely," he typed back quickly. "Let me know which entrance. I'll bring my car. If she's up to it, we can look at temporary housing options right away." Her reply came moments later. "Sounds good. Thank you, Daniel." He excused himself from the meeting shortly after, ignoring curious looks from a couple of department heads. In the elevator, he tried to quell the mild adrenaline rushing through him. He was determined to handle this right, to show Amy that he wasn't just some corporate suit dabbling in charity, but someone genuinely invested in helping her reclaim stability for herself and her child. By 1:20, Daniel arrived at the county hospital's parking lot, feeling a sense of déjà vu. He'd been here just days before, helping Amy into the ER. The recollection of her feverish collapse struck him, a reminder of how fragile her health still might be. But this time, he walked in with hope. Rachel was already waiting in the lobby with Sarah, who perched on a chair kicking her feet nervously. The child lit up at the sight of Daniel, though her smile remained tentative. Rachel's grin was warmer, relief evident in her tired eyes. She wore jeans and a light sweater, an upgrade from her cleaning uniform, though she still seemed overshadowed by lingering exhaustion. Thanks for coming, Rachel greeted quietly. Amy's final paperwork is being processed upstairs. They said we could meet her by the nurse's station. Daniel glanced at Sarah. Shall we go up together? Sarah nodded, clutching her stuffed bunny. They took the elevator to the second floor. Stepping into the busy corridor, Daniel was struck by the mix of antiseptic smells and the low hum of medical machines, sounds that he knew must be deeply unsettling for Sarah, who was about to see her mother in a hospital gown for the first time since the crisis. A nurse at the station recognized Rachel. She's waiting in room 212, the nurse explained. All set to be discharged, just waiting on the doctor to sign off. Follow me. They followed her down the hall. At the threshold of room 212, Sarah paused, a flicker of fear in her eyes. Daniel crouched beside her. Hey, your mom's better now. She'll be so happy to see you. Want me or Rachel to go in first? The little girl hesitated, then tugged Rachel's hand. Rachel entered first, Daniel close behind, Sarah trailing timidly. Inside, Amy sat propped up on the bed, IV removed but a bandage on her arm. Her complexion was still pale, cheeks slightly hollow, but she managed a fragile smile. "Mommy!" Sarah gasped, rushing over. Amy opened her arms wide, tears shining as she pulled her daughter onto the bed. They embraced tightly, mother and child clinging like they might never let go. Rachel gently moved to Amy's side, laying a supportive hand on her shoulder. Daniel stood back, giving them space. His heart tightened at the raw emotion of the reunion. After a moment, Amy's gaze found him. There was gratitude in her eyes along with a lingering wariness. "I remember you," she said softly, voice still hoarse. "You were with Rachel, helping us at the camp, then at the hospital. Daniel, right?" He nodded. "Yes, I'm so glad to see you looking better." She exhaled shakily. "I can't thank you enough. Rachel told me you covered some of my hospital expenses. I don't know how I can ever repay that." "Don't worry about repayment," Daniel said. "Just focus on regaining your health. Sarah needs you. We're here to help however we can." Amy's eyes misted again. She glanced at Rachel. "And you, taking care of Sarah all this time, missing work. I owe you everything." Rachel shook her head vehemently. "You owe me nothing. I just did what I'd hope anyone would do if roles were reversed." There was a beat of silence, thick with the weight of gratitude. Then Amy drew a shaky breath. "They're releasing me, but I don't know if I should go back to that camp. The doctor says I need rest, antibiotics. The camp isn't safe or clean. Sarah deserves better than a tent in the cold." Daniel stepped forward gently. "We can arrange a motel for a few days. Then, with Rachel's help, we'll look for a longer-term solution, a shelter or transitional housing. I'm reaching out to nonprofits that might have openings." Amy hesitated, tears brimming. "A motel? That sounds expensive." He offered a reassuring smile. "My company has a fund for situations like this. Let's get you stable first. Then, when you're stronger, we can discuss more permanent plans." Her relief was palpable. Sarah clung to her mother's side, soaking in every moment as if afraid Amy might vanish again. Rachel gently patted the little girl's shoulder, voice soft. "I'll stick around and help with whatever you need. You're not alone in this." The nurse returned with discharge papers instructing Amy on medication and follow-up appointments. Daniel quietly took note of each requirement, dates, times, prescriptions. Rachel promised to help Amy fill them, ensuring she'd follow through. Together, they helped Amy into the clothing Rachel had brought from her meager supply of donated items: sweatpants, a hoodie, slip-on shoes. Leaning on Rachel's arm, Amy gave one last look at the hospital bed where she'd spent the last few days, then ushered Sarah forward. They walked slowly into the hallway, Daniel trailing close, ready to support if Amy felt faint. On the elevator ride down, passers-by threw curious glances at their small group: a mother just released from the hospital, a child glued to her side, a tired volunteer, and a well-dressed businessman. Once they were in the lobby, Daniel cleared his throat. "My SUV is out front. Let's get you both seated comfortably. I'll take us to the nearest motel I know that's clean and safe. Then we'll see about next steps." Amy looked torn between gratitude and lingering pride. I don't want to be a burden." Rachel squeezed Amy's hand. "It's not a burden. We're friends, right? Friends help each other." They headed outside to the curb, the midday sun warming the hospital driveway. Daniel assisted Amy into the back seat, where Sarah climbed in next to her. Rachel took the front passenger seat. As he pulled away, Daniel noticed the small smile on Sarah's face, seeing her mother's hand gently resting on hers. Soon they arrived at a modest motel on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy. Pale stucco walls, a small sign that read, "Vacancy" in neon letters. But it was reputable, with clean rooms and a lobby that smelled of fresh coffee. Daniel parked, leading the group inside. He approached the front desk, explaining they needed a room for at least a few nights. The clerk gave them a once-over, eyes lingering on Amy's tired appearance and Sarah's thin jacket. Daniel slid a corporate credit card across the desk. "Reserve a room in my name," he said with the composed air of a man used to such transactions. "For at least 5 nights, possibly longer." Amy started to protest quietly. 5 nights? That's too much." Daniel shot her a reassuring look. "Let's not rush your recovery. You need to make sure you're stable, and Sarah should feel settled. This place has basic amenities, and it'll be a world better than the camp." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't know how to thank you." He gently passed the room key to her. "No thanks needed. Just rest. Get well." Following the clerk's directions, they made their way to a ground-floor room. It was simple. 2 queen beds, a small table, a TV, and a bathroom. The carpet was worn in spots, but the sheets looked clean. Amy sank onto the edge of one bed, Sarah beside her. Rachel dropped a small bag of supplies on the other bed. Daniel stepped back, letting them settle. "We'll pick up your prescription," he offered. "Rachel, do you have time to grab groceries for them too? The motel's mini fridge might hold some basic items." Rachel nodded. "Of course." She turned to Amy. "We'll make sure you have soup, cereal, snacks for Sarah. Anything else you need?" Amy wiped her eyes, shaking her head. "You're already doing so much." Sarah looked up at Daniel, hugging her bunny. "Is Mommy going to be okay now?" she asked, her voice small. His heart clenched. "Yes, Sarah," he said softly. "We'll make sure she's okay." He ruffled her hair gently, relieved to see the fear in her eyes easing. Amy lay back against the pillows, her exhaustion evident. "Just being in a real bed is so wonderful," she murmured. "Rachel, can you stay for a bit while Daniel gets the meds? I'm a little nervous being alone with Sarah if I start feeling dizzy." "Of course," Rachel said. "Daniel, I'll wait here." He glanced at his watch, nearly mid-afternoon. There was still time to swing by a pharmacy. "I'll be quick," he promised, stepping toward the door. "If you need anything else, call me." Amy nodded, her expression swimming with gratitude. Sarah watched him go, a hint of a smile flickering across her lips. As Daniel slipped into the bright afternoon sun, he paused outside the motel room, inhaling the fresh air. He felt both the weight of responsibility and the exhilaration that came from helping in such a direct, personal way. He strode to his SUV, mind already mapping the next steps, picking up prescriptions, grabbing healthy groceries, maybe some fun activities for Sarah to do while her mom rested. And beyond that, continuing to build the fledgling philanthropic effort at Wilson Enterprises, forging real partnerships to help more families like Amy's. In the rearview mirror, his reflection caught his eye, no longer just the polished CEO checking quarterly profits, but a man determined to align his corporate power with urgent human needs. As he started the engine, a whisper of resolve echoed in his mind. This is only the beginning, and somehow he knew Rachel was right at the heart of it. a beacon guiding him toward a more compassionate future, hand in hand with the people who needed it most. The late afternoon sun glinted off the rows of cars in the pharmacy parking lot as Daniel Wilson stepped out of his SUV. He tucked a small notepad into his suit pocket. He'd jotted down Amy's prescription details plus a quick grocery list Rachel had requested. The air smelled faintly of sizzling asphalt, the day's heat lingering in the blacktop. Even so, Daniel felt a spring in his step. For once, he was running errands, not for corporate convenience, but for a family in need. Inside, the pharmacy was a bustle of soft beeps from the registers and murmured exchanges at the prescription counter. A mother with a stroller rifled through a coupon book, an elderly man shuffled toward the aisles of vitamins, and a bored teenager scanned items at the front. Daniel approached the pharmacist, a young woman wearing a white coat with a calm smile. "I'm here to pick up a prescription for Amy Martin," he said, handing over the slip that the hospital had prepared. "She was recently discharged. I believe her medication was phoned in this morning." The pharmacist checked her screen. "Yes, Mr. Wilson, we have that antibiotic and a short course of anti-inflammatory meds. Insurance?" Daniel shook his head. "I'll pay out of pocket, whatever she needs." She typed a few entries, then quoted the cost. He didn't bat an eye as he handed over the company card. An irony flickered in his mind, that only a few days ago he'd have run such expenses through meticulous CFO approvals, or at least questioned how it aligned with philanthropic guidelines. Now it felt like second nature to cover immediate necessities. After signing the receipt, Daniel added politely, "Is there anything else the doctor might have recommended? Over-the-counter vitamins or something to boost recovery?" The pharmacist considered. If she's been malnourished, a basic multivitamin could help. Something gentle on the stomach, especially alongside the antibiotics. He nodded. "Let's do that." Soon, he was leaving with a small white pharmacy bag. With that done, he wheeled a cart around the corner to the attached grocery section, scanning the shelves for the simplest healthy options. A rotisserie chicken, pre-made soup, some fresh vegetables to cook in the motel's microwave. He wasn't entirely sure how well-equipped the room was, but hopefully they could at least heat up a few things. He also tossed in some comfort items, juice boxes and crackers for Sarah, ginger tea for Amy, plus a bouquet of cheap daisies that he thought might brighten the sterile motel space. It was a small gesture, but something about bringing flowers felt symbolic, a bit of color and hope in a life that had been monochrome for too long. Stowing the bags carefully in the SUV, Daniel took a moment to text Rachel. "Picked up meds and groceries. Heading back to the motel now. How's Amy holding up?" He didn't expect an immediate reply. She was likely busy with Sarah or chatting with Amy. But a minute later, the phone buzzed. "She's good, just resting. Hurry back, though. Sarah wants to show you something she drew." Rachel. A smile tugged at his lips. Sarah's new confidence warmed him. He recalled how timid she'd been on that first night at the hospital, barely speaking. Now she was trusting enough to want to share her drawings. The difference made his chest tighten with a mixture of pride and protective instinct. Back at the motel, Daniel found the door to Amy's room slightly ajar, letting in a sliver of the warm outside air. He rapped gently. Rachel opened it, greeting him with a tired but genuine smile. "Come in," she murmured, stepping aside. He ducked inside, noticing that the overhead light was off, but sunshine filtered through the thick curtains. Amy lounged against the pillows, Sarah curled at the foot of the bed with crayons and a stack of papers. The mother looked exhausted, but she managed a grateful nod as Daniel set the bags on the small table. "Got your medication," he told her, retrieving the pharmacy bag first. The pharmacist included instructions. 2 pills a day for 10 days, plus vitamins. "Thank you," Amy breathed, eyes swimming with relief. "I was worried about how I'd afford them. And, well, I know Rachel's done so much already." "It's no trouble," Daniel assured. He pulled out the daisies, shyly offering them. "Thought these might brighten up the place." Surprise flickered over Amy's face, followed by a soft smile. "Flowers," she murmured, brushing her fingers over the petals. "That's so sweet. Thank you." Meanwhile, Sarah hopped up, a sheet of paper in hand. She hesitated a second, then took a step toward Daniel. "Look," she said quietly, extending the page. It was a bright crayon drawing of 3 figures, standing beside a boxy shape that was presumably a house. One figure had long hair, likely Rachel. Another had shorter hair, possibly Amy, and a taller figure with a blocky shape for suit pants had to be Daniel. They stood under a big yellow sun, smiling. He crouched to her level, accepting the drawing. "That's us?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded, eyes shining. "That's my mommy," she pointed, "and that's Ms. Rachel, and that's you." She tapped the tall figure with a green crayon. Daniel felt his throat tighten. "It's wonderful," he said sincerely. "I'm honored to be in your picture." Sarah smiled, that timid but sweet grin he was growing to treasure. Rachel, observing from the corner, folded her arms, eyes gleaming with quiet affection. Then she cleared her throat and gestured to the grocery bags on the table. "Thanks for grabbing supplies," she said, stepping over to unpack. She found the chicken and vegetables. "Perfect. We can heat some of this up for dinner. Although, Amy, how do you feel?" Amy eased upright. "A bit dizzy still, but better than I was at the hospital. Just having a clean shower and bed is a luxury I forgot existed." She shot them a shaky smile. "Sarah and I will figure out how to make the most of it." Daniel nodded, noticing the slight worry lines on her face. "We can extend the motel stay if you're not fully recovered by the time the initial reservation ends. Don't rush back to that camp. We want to help you find a safer option." Amy lowered her gaze. "I've been out of a stable home for almost a year. Landlords don't want to rent to me without proof of steady income." She sighed. "That's why it's so hard to leave the camp." Rachel approached, resting a gentle hand on Amy's shoulder. "We're working on new resources," she said, then glanced at Daniel for confirmation. "We have an actual fund now, and Daniel's talking to nonprofits. We might find a transitional housing program open to families like yours." Amy swallowed, tears brimming. "That would be a miracle. I'd do anything to give Sarah a real home again, somewhere we can lock the door, somewhere she can have a childhood." A hush fell. Then Sarah broke the silence, tugging on her mother's sleeve. "Can we have chicken now? I'm hungry," she whispered. Everyone let out a soft chuckle at her innocent directness. Rachel nodded. "Sure, sweetie. Why don't you show me how to open that fridge and we'll see if we can heat this up." She carefully led Sarah to the motel's small kitchenette area, flicking on a dim overhead bulb. Amy watched them go, her eyes still moist. She turned back to Daniel. "I feel guilty for accepting all this help, like I'm not pulling my weight." He shook his head firmly. "You've had a rough break, losing a job, a place to stay, facing health issues. This is just a hand-up, not a permanent handout. Once you're stable, you'll find your footing again, I'm certain of it." Her lips quivered in a faint, hopeful smile. "Thank you. I want to repay you someday. Maybe I can volunteer at your new program or help others once I'm back on my feet." "That would be fantastic," he said. "I truly believe people who've been in your shoes can offer the best support to others going through it." She nodded, wiping a tear. "You and Rachel, you're angels. Before this, I felt so alone. Now, I have some hope." The quiet sincerity of her words struck Daniel deeply. "We're far from angels, trust me," he murmured, remembering how easily he'd overlooked the homeless crisis for years. "But I'm glad we met you. You've opened my eyes as much as we've helped you." Their conversation paused as Rachel and Sarah rejoined them. "I found a microwave and some plates," Rachel announced, brandishing a small stack of disposable dishes. "We'll do an improvised dinner. Chicken, veggies, maybe some fruit for dessert." Sarah cheered softly, clapping her hands. Daniel stepped in to help, portioning out the meals. The motel's tiny table was just big enough for Amy to eat comfortably. Rachel perched on the edge of the second bed while Daniel stood off to the side, balancing a plate in his hand. It was cramped, but a sense of warmth and camaraderie filled the room. Every so often, Sarah would pipe up with a question about the flowers or the chicken, and each time the adults answered with gentle enthusiasm. After they finished eating, Daniel disposed of the trash and insisted on cleaning up. He noticed Amy yawning, her eyelids heavy. Clearly she wasn't fully recovered, and rest would be her best medicine. Rachel caught his glance and nodded in understanding. "We should let you sleep," Rachel said softly to Amy, gathering her belongings. "Sarah, you'll stay with your mommy now. Remember to take it easy. No big adventures." Sarah bobbed her head, hugging her bunny. She looked to Daniel, a flicker of sadness in her eyes, as though worried this goodbye might be final. He gave her a gentle smile, stooping to meet her at eye level. "We'll be back to check on you both tomorrow. If you need anything in the meantime, tell your mom and we'll come running, okay?" Sarah nodded, stepping forward to offer him a quick, shy hug. The gesture made Daniel's chest tighten with emotion. He softly patted her back, then straightened, noticing Amy also blinking tears. "Take care," he told them both. "Get lots of rest." Outside, the afternoon had shifted into a hazy dusk. Rachel closed the motel room door behind them, exhaling as she turned to Daniel. "That went well, I think. Amy's safe for now." He nodded, leading her across the parking lot to his SUV. "Yes, but the real test is finding a long-term solution." He opened the passenger door for her. "I have my philanthropic manager looking into transitional housing programs. Some might have waiting lists, but we can expedite if needed." Rachel slid into the seat, buckling up. "I'm in awe of how much you've accomplished in just a few days. Not just for them, but for the bigger project, like the fund, the potential day program for kids at the camp. It's incredible." Daniel settled behind the wheel, the engine purring to life. "It's thanks to you," he said quietly. "You inspired this, Rachel. Before I met you, I never thought about personal involvement. Just wrote checks, delegated it to a department. Now I see how urgent and human these issues are." She remained silent for a moment, gazing out the window as the motel lights blurred past. Then she looked at him, her voice soft. "You've changed too, Daniel. I can see it. You're not the same buttoned-up CEO who discovered me cooking in the company kitchen." He chuckled ruefully, pulling onto the road. "Finding you there was the best thing that ever happened to me, or to Wilson Enterprises, maybe." Rachel's cheeks warmed, a slight blush coloring her face in the glow of passing streetlights. "Funny how life works," she murmured. "I was terrified you'd fire me. Now we're—" She trailed off, uncertain how to finish. Allies? Partners? Friends? Something else? The unspoken possibilities hovered in the air. Daniel swallowed, keeping his focus on the road, though he felt his pulse quicken. He cleared his throat. "I guess we are working together," he supplied gently, leaving the deeper undertones unvoiced. They were forging a bond that might transcend mere collaboration, but neither seemed quite ready to name it. The drive back to Rachel's apartment was quiet, a comfortable hush between them. When they arrived, she asked, "Will you come up? I can make coffee or tea. We can discuss next steps for the day program idea." Daniel eyed the time, already nearing 8. Yet the thought of hashing out plans or simply sharing a moment of peace was enticing. "I'd like that," he said, "but only if you're not exhausted." She shook her head. "I'm too wired to sleep yet. Let's figure out a blueprint for the kids' program, maybe set some calls for tomorrow." Inside her modest apartment, Daniel was struck again by how small and unassuming it was, yet brimming with Rachel's quiet warmth. She switched on a dim lamp, motioning for him to sit on the couch while she prepared tea. He settled in, scanning the handful of volunteer flyers pinned to her bulletin board. evidence of her unwavering commitment. Rachel returned with 2 steaming mugs, passing one to him before sinking down beside him, not too close, but close enough that he could catch the faint scent of lavender from her hair. Their shoulders nearly touched, sending a small jolt of awareness through him. They spent the next hour outlining steps for the Children's Day Center, a safe place with basic supplies, volunteer staff, perhaps a small budget for snacks and educational materials. Daniel took notes on his phone, naming potential local partners, while Rachel shared contacts who might co-manage the project. The conversation flowed easily, energized by their shared vision. At one point, their gazes met, and Daniel paused. Her eyes shone with a mix of gratitude and something that made his heart skip. "Rachel," he said softly, "thank you for being who you are. If not for you, I'd still be stuck in that corporate bubble, never realizing what a difference we can make." She gave a half smile. "And if not for you," she whispered, "I'd be struggling alone, never imagining a CEO would stand up for the people I care about." They fell quiet, the unspoken closeness thickening. Then, gently, Daniel cleared his throat, turning back to the phone screen. "So, about the old community center we acquired last year. I recall it's mostly unused. That might be a perfect site for the day program." Rachel brightened, nodding. "Yes, if we could refurbish a room or 2, add some furniture, it'd be huge." And so they pressed on, drafting ideas late into the evening. By the time Daniel reluctantly stood to leave, they had a workable plan, and a deepening bond that neither quite knew how to define. Stepping out into the cool night air, Daniel felt a surge of purpose mixed with a flutter of anticipation for what lay ahead. If the days past were any indication, their partnership, personal and philanthropic, was poised to transform more lives, including their own. Warm sunlight streamed through the large windows of the old community center, highlighting motes of dust that danced in the air. Daniel Wilson stood just inside the double doors, surveying a large, open room. The floor was made of scuffed hardwood, and faded murals from some long-ago art project adorned the walls. A faint smell of must and old books lingered. He could imagine children running around here, painting, learning, and he felt a thrill of possibility. "This place has good bones," Rachel said, stepping up beside him. She brushed her fingers across a chipped windowsill, then smiled. "A few tables, some beanbags, a fresh coat of paint. It'll be perfect for a kid's daytime center." Daniel nodded, feeling that same surge of conviction he'd experienced when they first discussed the idea. For weeks they had been juggling details, from city permits to volunteer schedules, using Rachel's local contacts and Daniel's company resources to piece together something tangible. Today marked the first official walkthrough of the property with the aim of transforming it into a safe haven for homeless or precariously housed children. He turned to the philanthropic manager from Wilson Enterprises, who hovered near the door with a clipboard. "We'll need to budget for repairs," Daniel said. "New lighting especially. And let's make sure the bathrooms are fully functional." The manager, a woman named Justine, jotted notes. "Understood. The city has a small grant for community use. We can apply for that too. It won't cover everything, but every bit helps." Rachel wandered further inside, her eyes shining with that quiet excitement Daniel had come to recognize. She paused by an old chalkboard, its surface scratched. "We can do basic lessons here, maybe reading or math sessions," she mused. "Even a crafts corner. Some kids have missed years of structured schooling." A swirl of pride rushed through Daniel. As a CEO, he'd negotiated multi-million-dollar acquisitions without batting an eye. But this, watching Rachel outline a vision for real kids in real need, felt far more significant. "We'll get you all the craft supplies you want," he promised, stepping closer. "And we can set up a reading nook with donated books." Rachel smiled warmly. "Books, yes, a little library. Maybe we can have volunteers read stories, help the kids practice reading. Some of the parents might want to attend too." Justine cleared her throat gently. I should mention, once we refurbish this space, it'll need ongoing staff or volunteers to run daily. Are we sure we have enough manpower? Daniel glanced at Rachel. We'll recruit more volunteers from the local nonprofits. The pilot fund from Wilson Enterprises will cover stipends for a handful of part-time coordinators. If the program grows, we'll reassess. The key is to get started. Rachel nodded. I know at least 3 or 4 people from the camp or from the church kitchens who want to help. Many have day jobs or kids, but they'll pitch in. Maybe we can schedule rotating shifts. It sounded ambitious, but Daniel could see the outlines of a sustainable plan. Let's do it. I'll have my team finalize the paperwork so we can start renovations next week. Justine nodded, scribbling more notes. I'll coordinate with maintenance. We'll start with a thorough clean, a fresh coat of paint. Then we can bring in furnishings. If all goes smoothly, we might be ready for a soft opening in 3 or 4 weeks. Rachel pressed her palms together, beaming. That's so soon. It's perfect. Colder weather is just a few months away. We need a safe, warm place by then. A glimmer of pride flickered in Daniel's chest. He recalled how only a month ago he'd discovered Rachel cooking late at night, never imagining it would lead to this blossoming collaboration. Thank you, Justine, he said. Keep me updated. With that, the philanthropic manager excused herself to make some calls, leaving Daniel and Rachel alone in the echoing room. The hush felt almost sacred, as if the space was holding its breath, waiting for children's laughter to fill it once more. Rachel turned in a slow circle, her gaze lingering on the walls. I can already picture the kids painting murals, she murmured. For once, they'll have a bright, clean spot to be themselves. No fear of being chased away, no heartbreak of sleeping on the street. Daniel approached, his footsteps echoing. That's exactly what I want them to have, he said softly. A place to hope, without worrying about losing it tomorrow. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. You really are making a difference. People in my circle keep asking, who is this Daniel Wilson? Is he for real? She gave a light laugh. I tell them yes, he's the real deal. A gentle warmth spread through him at her praise. I'm just sorry it took me so long to see what was right under my nose. Now that I know, I can't turn away, and I couldn't do any of this without you, Rachel. Her cheeks colored slightly, though she maintained eye contact. Well, we make a good team. She echoed the sentiment from nights past. Should we head out? Amy and Sarah are waiting for us at the motel. Amy has a few leads on potential job interviews, and she wants to update us. Right, let's go, Daniel agreed. We can talk design ideas on the way. They locked up the center, stepping into bright sunshine. As they walked to the SUV, a comfortable silence stretched between them. Sometimes Daniel felt an unspoken tension, an awareness of how their connection had deepened beyond a simple professional alliance. Yet neither had openly acknowledged it. Perhaps they were both wary of complicating their mission or fearful of crossing lines. Regardless, the closeness was there in the way Rachel looked at him, trusting yet measured, and in the protective instincts that flared in Daniel's chest whenever he saw her exhausted or overwhelmed. The drive to the motel took about 15 minutes. Daniel parked, noticing a distinct difference in Amy's demeanor when they entered her room. She was tidying up, hair brushed neatly, and she moved with far less shakiness than before. Sarah was occupied on the bed, flipping through a coloring book. She brightened upon seeing Rachel and Daniel springing up with a quiet wave. Amy nodded a greeting, setting a folding map on the small table. Hey, you two, you're earlier than I expected. Rachel grinned. We were checking out the community center. It's going to be a perfect site for the Kids' Day program. She looked around. How are you feeling? Amy exhaled. Much better. The antibiotics are working. I managed to shower again this morning. It's heaven compared to the camp. She glanced at Sarah, who fiddled with her bunny. I was just looking at bus routes for some job interviews. Daniel stepped closer, curiosity piqued. Oh? Where? Amy tapped the map. A warehouse not too far from here is hiring for inventory clerks. I used to do some shipping and receiving before everything went south. Plus, a diner across town needs a dishwasher. Rachel lit up. That's great news. Let's see if we can help with transportation. Have you called them yet? Amy nodded. I left messages, hoping to schedule something soon. If I get a job, maybe I can save for an apartment, though deposit fees are high. But I'm determined. Daniel placed a gentle hand on the back of a chair, leaning in. I can cover deposit costs if you find a place. That's part of the new fund, and we'll help with references. Anything you need. Overwhelmed, Amy smiled tearfully. I still can't believe all of this is real. The motel, the possibility of a job, the day program for Sarah. I feel hope, Sarah piped up, hugging her bunny. If Mommy gets a job, can I stay in the day center sometimes? Rachel laughed softly. Of course. You'll be a VIP. She flicked a glance at Daniel. We'll need good role models. Right, Daniel? He nodded, smiling. Absolutely. Sarah can be our official coloring ambassador. The little girl beamed, hugging her bunny tighter. Meanwhile, Amy rubbed her forehead, emotional. You're changing our lives. Thank you, she whispered. A hush fell. Then Daniel cleared his throat. So how about we celebrate with an early lunch, my treat? We can grab something healthy, maybe that sandwich shop down the road. You and Sarah can get some fresh air. Amy hesitated, gaze drifting to the door. Well, I guess stepping out won't hurt. I just worry about paying you back again. Daniel shook his head emphatically. Don't. This is me fulfilling a promise to ensure you're healthy and comfortable. That includes a good meal. Let's go, all four of us. Rachel shot him a subtle smile. He could almost hear her unspoken approval. Come on, she urged Amy. Fresh air and a sandwich never hurt anyone. Within minutes, they were in Daniel's SUV rolling down the main road. The sandwich shop turned out to be a cozy local spot with bright murals and potted plants. As they entered, an employee at the counter greeted them cheerily. They settled at a small table near the window, the sun illuminating their little group. Amy scrolled through the menu uncertainly until Daniel gently insisted she pick whatever she liked. Sarah requested a simple turkey sandwich, Rachel chose a vegetarian wrap, and Daniel ordered grilled chicken on whole wheat. He also added a side of fruit salad for the table, wanting to keep the meal as nutritious as possible. While they waited, Sarah peered out the window at passers-by. Amy relaxed into her chair, scanning the space. It's been so long since I ate in a real place, she murmured. Feels weird not rushing or worrying. Rachel reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You're safe here. So is Sarah. That's the new normal we want for you. Daniel nodded, tapping on his phone to confirm a quick detail with his CFO. Then he set it aside, focusing on the moment. Any luck calling about the apartment listings, by the way? That might be next after you land a job. Amy exhaled. I left a message for one manager, but they said they want 2 months' rent up front plus references. I'm worried about that. I have no credit left, and my old references might be out of date. We'll figure it out, Daniel reassured. I can be a reference, and we have folks at Wilson Enterprises who can vouch for you. The deposit is covered, so that's one hurdle down. The arrival of their food brought a moment of cheerful distraction. As they ate, the conversation drifted to the community center's potential opening day. Sarah perked up, mid-bite, at the mention of paint and murals, eyes gleaming with a child's excitement. Amy asked about job postings at Wilson Enterprises. Maybe she could try for a support role there once she was stable. Daniel didn't dismiss the idea. In fact, he found it appealing to keep her close, where he could ensure she had all the resources she needed. By the time they finished, the tension in Amy's expression had eased. Daniel paid at the counter while Rachel led Sarah out to the sidewalk. When he emerged, receipt in hand, he noticed how the midday sun softened the lines of Rachel's face, her eyes alight with quiet contentment. Amy waited by the SUV, Sarah at her side. wearing a small grin as she recounted the lunch to her bunny as if the stuffed toy needed to hear the day's events. They piled back into the car. Daniel asked, "Back to the motel, or do you want to swing by a store for interview clothes?" Amy blinked. "Interview clothes might help, but I'd feel awkward letting you buy that too." Rachel turned in her seat. "Let's at least look around. You need to present well, right? And there's a thrift store not far from here with decent stuff. It won't break the bank." She caught Daniel's eye, and he nodded. That was a good compromise. Amy would get more formal clothing for job hunting, but at an affordable place, so she didn't feel overwhelmed by guilt. "Thrift store it is," Daniel declared, starting the engine. "Then we can drop you two back at the motel for some rest." Amy stared out the window as they drove. "I was so sure last week that I was stuck forever and that I'd never climb out of that camp. Now I'm sitting in a nice car, planning for job interviews, and my daughter is smiling again." Sarah, overhearing, tugged her mother's sleeve, offering a bright grin. "I like it," she said simply. Daniel's chest tightened with emotion. He met Rachel's gaze in the rear-view mirror, an unspoken acknowledgement that all their efforts were paying off. Soon, they pulled into the thrift store parking lot, an unassuming building with a simple sign reading "Second Chance." The name felt apt. Inside, racks of gently worn clothing lined the walls, with a separate section for shoes and accessories. Amy set Sarah on a nearby seat with a coloring book and ventured into the racks. Rachel followed, helping pick out simple blouses and slacks. Daniel lingered near the front, half smiling at the calm bustle of thrifty shoppers. He overheard delighted exclamations from Rachel as she found something in Amy's size, and grateful murmurs from Amy as she tried it on. After half an hour, they re-emerged, a small bag of clothing in hand. Daniel insisted on covering the cost at the register, and this time, Amy didn't protest too loudly. The total was modest, far from the kind of extravagant spending Daniel was used to, but to Amy, it clearly meant the world. With their errands done, they drove back to the motel. Amy stepped out, balancing the thrift store bag while Sarah clutched her bunny. "Thank you again," she said, turning to Daniel. "If my interviews go well, I might be working in no time, and that's thanks to you, both of you." Rachel hopped out, giving Amy a quick hug. "Text me if you need anything. Rides, grocery runs, anything, promise?" Amy nodded, tears hovering in her eyes. "Promise." Daniel rolled down his window, calling out, "Remember, you're not alone. We'll be back tomorrow with updates on the community center. Good luck with your interviews if they call." Sarah waved the bunny in farewell. With that, Daniel guided the SUV out of the parking lot, a gentle satisfaction settling over him. He glanced at Rachel in the passenger seat. She was gazing at the motel, a small smile playing on her lips. "Amy's on her way to a new life," Rachel murmured. "Feels like a small miracle." Daniel reached over, lightly brushing the back of her hand with his fingers. "Let's keep making miracles," he said gently. "We have so many others who need the same chance." She squeezed his fingers in silent agreement. And in that quiet moment, sunlight pouring over the dashboard, hearts brimming with hope, they continued on, determined to bring that same spark of opportunity to the rest of the families still waiting in the shadows. 3 weeks later, the vacant community center that had once stood neglected was humming with life. The walls were freshly painted in bright, cheerful colors. The old chalkboard had been replaced by a new whiteboard, and donated beanbag chairs created a cozy reading nook in one corner. Daniel Wilson stood in the center of it all, dressed more casually than anyone at Wilson Enterprises would have believed in khakis and a simple polo, surveying the transformation with an awe that never quite diminished. Around him, children hurried between activity stations, voices echoing against the high ceiling. A small group colored pictures of flowers and sunshine, while another gathered for a reading circle led by a volunteer. Rachel, wearing jeans and her favorite faded green sweater, moved from one group to the next with easy warmth, ensuring everyone had what they needed: crayons, water, an encouraging smile. "Daniel, hey!" She caught his eye and motioned him over to a table where small cups of juice were laid out. "You okay managing the snack station?" she teased, arching a playful brow. "We're short of volunteers. Someone had a last-minute emergency." He stepped forward, grin tugging at his lips. "Of course," he said, grabbing a couple of cups to hand out. "It's the least I can do. My board of directors might never guess I'd end up distributing juice boxes." Rachel chuckled, lightly tapping his shoulder. "I've seen you handle bigger tasks." She left him to serve the children while she tended to other corners of the room. As Daniel watched her gracefully juggle requests, one child needed help with a puzzle, another wanted more paper for drawing. He marveled at how seamlessly she transitioned from caretaker to teacher to problem solver. Her compassionate energy was exactly what he'd been drawn to in the first place. Eventually, the kids grouped up for a short recess in the center's small courtyard. Rachel joined Daniel by the doorway, watching the commotion with a fond gaze. "They already seem more confident," she remarked. "Just having a space that's theirs. It's amazing how it changes their demeanor." Daniel nodded. "All thanks to you." He turned to study her profile. "You spearheaded everything, brought the volunteers together, designed the activities, handled the family's concerns." She blushed faintly. "Couldn't have done it without you, or the philanthropic fund, or the maintenance crew who renovated this place." Her mouth twitched in a smile. "But I won't lie. It's nice seeing it all come to life." They stood in companionable silence as the children laughed and played. In a corner of the courtyard, Amy's daughter Sarah was laughing with two new friends, swirling around in a game of pretend. The sight made Daniel's heart swell. Sarah no longer clung to her bunny quite as tightly. Her eyes shone with a playful confidence he never thought he'd see. Nearby, Amy herself helped set up a small station for an art project. She looked healthier than ever. She'd found a part-time job at a shipping warehouse and was saving up for an apartment, with Daniel's help covering the deposit. Each step forward felt like a piece of a puzzle finally snapping into place. "Hey, boss!" A friendly voice interrupted Daniel's thoughts. Justine, the philanthropic manager from Wilson Enterprises, approached with a folder in hand. "I have those updated expense reports for the center. Looks like we're under budget so far, and that's even after we installed those new bookshelves you requested." "That's great," Daniel said, scanning the figures. A sense of satisfaction settled over him. "We can use the surplus to bring in more educational materials, or maybe a used computer or two for older kids to practice typing. Anything that opens doors." Justine nodded. "I'll coordinate, and if you ever consider expanding, maybe offering an evening program, just let me know. We're building a solid reputation with local nonprofits." He thanked her as she moved on, and from the corner of his eye, Daniel saw Rachel checking her phone. He recognized the faint frown that sometimes crossed her face when she was overtired. Quietly, he stepped behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "All good?" he asked, voice low so the kids wouldn't overhear. She turned, startled, then relaxed. "Yeah, just noticing the time. It's been a long day, but a good one." He rubbed her shoulder gently, mindful of the watchful gazes around them, though most of the parents and volunteers were preoccupied with the kids. "You've done enough for today. How about letting the volunteers close up while you rest?" She shook her head. "I can't leave them to do everything. There's cleanup, plus sorting new donations. People dropped off a bunch of blankets." She paused, eyes scanning the room. "But maybe after an hour? I could use a nap." Daniel's response was light but firm. "If you don't rest, you'll burn out, and this place needs you for the long haul." He hesitated, then added, "Plus, I was hoping we could talk once you're free." Rachel's eyes flicked up, curiosity and something else in her expression. "Talk about what?" He gave a gentle shrug, trying to play it casual though his heart thumped. "Plans for the future. Both the center's expansion and, well, other things." A flicker of warmth colored her cheeks. She nodded, not pressing further in front of the children. Sure, let's wrap up soon. An hour later, the final cluster of kids and parents departed, and the volunteers finished tidying. The late afternoon sun angled through the community center's high windows, casting long shadows on the shiny floors. Rachel confirmed that Teresa, one of her closest volunteer friends, would lock up. Satisfied, Daniel walked outside with her, a gentle breeze ruffling their hair as they crossed the short distance to his SUV. They slid into the seats, and Daniel turned on the engine. "Anywhere in particular you'd like to go?" Rachel leaned her head back against the seat. "Somewhere quiet," she murmured. "Maybe the park near your office? The one with the pond?" His chest tightened with a mix of anticipation and nerves. "Sounds good." The drive was comfortable silence. Now and then, Rachel commented on the day's small triumphs, how shy kids had opened up, how one parent asked about literacy classes for themselves. Daniel listened intently, cherishing her excitement. Yet beneath the surface, an urgent thought stirred in his mind. He wanted to open his heart to Rachel in a way he never had before. Upon arriving at the park, he found a parking spot near the pond. The water shimmered golden in the late sunlight, and ducks glided lazily across the surface. They walked side by side along a winding path, the hush broken only by rustling leaves and distant laughter from other visitors. Eventually, they reached a wooden bench under a willow tree. Rachel sank down, exhaling as if she were finally letting herself relax. "I can't believe how much has changed in so little time," she said softly. "From cooking soup in a corporate kitchen at midnight to launching a day center for homeless kids." Daniel sat beside her, his leg just close enough that her warmth was tangible. "You sparked it," he said simply. "Your compassion set everything in motion. I just followed your lead." She shot him a wry look. "I'd hardly say you're just following. You're the reason we have funding, resources, a building. Don't diminish your role." He smiled, turning his gaze to the water. "All right, fair enough. Let's say we did it together." They shared that comfortable silence again. Daniel's pulse fluttered as he reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers brushed against a small velvet pouch he'd been carrying for days, waiting for the right moment. Anxiety coiled in his stomach. This was a high-stakes step, more nerve-wracking than any board meeting. But looking at Rachel, seeing the gentle curve of her lips, the quiet light in her eyes, he knew it was time. He cleared his throat, turning to face her. "Rachel," he began, voice hushed. "I know we started out as just strangers, boss and employee almost. But what we share now, it's more than just a working relationship. It's deeper." She blinked, leaning in. "Daniel," she whispered, reading the gravity in his tone. He reached for her hand, heart pounding. "Every day I'm amazed by your courage, your kindness. You changed my life, made me see how love and generosity can reshape an entire community. And me, His words caught. Steeling himself, he pulled the velvet pouch from his pocket. He gently opened it, revealing a simple silver ring with a small diamond. Her eyes went wide, breath catching. "Daniel, I know this is fast. I know our lives have been a whirlwind. But I can't ignore how I feel," he said, voice trembling with sincerity. "I love you, Rachel, not just because of your heart for others, but because you bring out the best in me. I want us to keep doing this, building a future, helping people, standing side by side. Will you marry me?" Tears gathered in her eyes, a laugh of pure astonishment escaping her lips. She cupped her hand over her mouth, then exhaled shakily. "Oh my gosh. Yes, Daniel." Relief, joy, and 1,000 unspoken promises flooded him. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his own eyes damp. She let out a shaky laugh, throwing her arms around his neck, and he held her tightly, absorbing her warmth. For a long moment, they just clung to each other, the rest of the world falling away. When they finally broke apart, she sniffled, tears of happiness glistening. "I never saw this coming," she whispered, "but it feels so right." He brushed a lock of hair behind her ear, emotion thick in his voice. "We'll navigate everything, our philanthropic work, your passion for the homeless community, my role at Wilson Enterprises. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together. I want to start a family with you, create a home filled with the same love you show everyone else." She nodded, eyes shining. "We will, and we'll keep helping families like Amy's, building safe spaces for kids, just like we dreamed. But we'll do it as partners, as a family." He pressed his forehead gently to hers, the ring on her finger catching the warm glow of the setting sun. In the distance, ducks quacked on the pond and passers-by strolled by without intruding. Their moment was private, tender, a promise that everything they'd built together, from the day center to the rescue of countless families, would bloom even further now that they had committed their hearts to each other. As they stood and walked back to the SUV, hand in hand, Daniel realized that his story with Rachel, Amy, and Sarah wasn't merely about saving a few individuals from hardship. It was about igniting something larger, a movement of compassion and hope that could ripple through the city, fueled by the love he and Rachel shared. And so, in the warm glow of twilight, they drove off, engaged to be married, eager to continue their shared mission, to create a world where no one was invisible, where second chances weren't miracles but everyday reality. Because once love lit the way, everything else, corporate budgets, city permits, or social barriers, became obstacles they could conquer, together. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen